We're taught that mercy is its own reward, that kindness creates invisible threads connecting us to grace, to karma, to some cosmic justice that balances the scales. Fairy tales whisper it to us in childhood. Save the beggar at your door, and he'll transform into a prince. Show compassion to the wounded beast and discover he's been nobility all along. But when you're kneeling in dirt at 3 in the morning, hands buried in the slick heat of a dying stranger's wounds, you don't think about rewards. You think about breath. You think about the desperate, rattling sound of lungs trying to hold on to life. You think about how your grandmother's healing words are the only thing standing between this moment and a corpse cooling in the forest. And when dawn breaks and you hear them coming, 100 wolves, their howls splitting the morning like the world itself is tearing open, you learn the brutal reality: some acts of mercy don't connect you to grace. They chain you to fate. This is what I learned the night I saved a dying wolf in the woods behind my grandmother's cottage. This is what I discovered when those 100 wolves came to claim me. Not all debts are paid with gratitude. Some are paid with your entire life. Chapter 1. The wound that wouldn't close. The herbs were wrong. I'd gathered them at moonrise like grandmother taught me: valerian root for pain, yarrow for blood, comfrey for bone. But as I crushed them in the stone mortar, the paste turned gray instead of green. Death gray. The color of endings. Something's coming, grandmother said from her chair by the fire. She hadn't looked up from her knitting, but her needles had stopped clicking. In our house, silence meant danger more surely than any scream. I wiped my hands on my apron, leaving muddy green streaks across the rough linen. What kind of something? The kind that makes choices necessary. Her needles resumed their rhythm. Click, click, click. You'll need the red bottle. Third shelf. The red bottle. I'd only seen grandmother use it twice in my 23 years. Once for a child trampled by horses, once for a woman whose husband had. I pushed the memory away. The red bottle meant someone was dying. Meant someone needed ruby clay work, the kind that cost the healer almost as much as it cost the dying. Who? I asked, but grandmother just pointed to the door with one needle. I was halfway through the threshold when I heard it, a sound like wet thunder, like something heavy collapsing in the underbrush. Then nothing. Then a wheeze so human in its agony that my hands moved before my mind could. I ran. The forest behind our cottage wasn't safe after dark. Everyone in Millbrook knew that. We lived on the edge of shifter territory, that invisible border where human settlements gave way to packlands. Cross it, and you belong to them, their laws, their justice, their hunger. We'd learned to read the signs: scratch marks on trees, scent markers that made your eyes water, the occasional glimpse of something too large to be a natural wolf. But the sound was close, too close to be in packlands, and something in me, something grandmother had tried to train out of me for years, couldn't let anything suffer within reach of my hands. I found him 20 yards into the tree line. The wolf was massive. Even collapsed on his side, he was nearly as tall as my waist, his body stretching 6 feet from nose to tail. His fur was black as midnight water, except where blood had matted it into dark rust-colored patches. So much blood. It pooled beneath him, soaking into the forest floor, turning fallen leaves into a slick, burgundy carpet. He was dying. I could see it in the way his breathing had gone shallow and irregular, in the way his eyes, golden, too intelligent, too aware, tracked me with the resigned focus of someone watching their own ending approach. "Goddess help me," I whispered, dropping to my knees beside him. His lips pulled back from his teeth. A warning. Even dying, he was dangerous. "I know," I said, keeping my voice soft. "I know you could kill me. But I'm the only chance you have. So we're going to have to trust each other for the next few minutes." I didn't wait for permission. Couldn't afford to. My hands found the worst wound. A gash across his ribs that went deep, deeper than should have been survivable. I could see bone, could see the flutter of something that might have been lung tissue. The red bottle was warm in my pocket. I pulled it free, uncorked it with my teeth, and poured half the contents directly into the wound. The wolf's entire body went rigid. His jaw opened in a silent scream. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," I chanted, holding him down with my body weight laughable, really, given his size. But he was too weak to throw me. "It has to burn. It has to burn to work. Grandmother's medicine always burned." Said the body needed to know it was being saved, needed to fight alongside the cure. I didn't know if that was truth or just her philosophy, But I'd seen the red bottle pull 3 people back from death's door. Seen it close wounds that should have been fatal. I worked fast. Pressed yarrow paste into the smaller cuts. Wrapped comfrey-soaked bandages around his ribs. My hands moving in the pattern grandmother had drilled into me since childhood. Stop the blood. Stabilize the bone. Give the body reason to fight. The wolf watched me through it all. Never looked away. Those golden eyes stayed locked on my face with an intensity that felt like judgment. Like he was measuring my soul and finding it. What? Wanting? Worthy? I couldn't tell. You must have really angered someone. I murmured as I worked. Talking helped. Kept my hands steady. These wounds they're precise. This wasn't a fight. This was an execution that you somehow survived long enough to crawl away from. His ear twitched. The only acknowledgement he could manage. Well, whoever they were, they did terrible work. You're not dying tonight. I won't allow it. I said it with more confidence than I felt. But grandmother always said healing was half skill and half conviction. Make the body believe it will survive. And sometimes it's stubborn enough to listen. I don't know how long I knelt there, in the blood-soaked leaves. Time moved strangely. When I worked, minutes became hours. Hours became heartbeats. There was only the wound, the herbs, the desperate rhythm of breathing that I needed to keep going. But gradually, impossibly, the bleeding stopped. The wolf's breathing deepened. His eyes, which had started to glaze with death, sharpened again. There, I said, sitting back on my heels. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline draining away and leaving exhaustion in its wake. You'll live. The wounds will scar, and you'll be sore for weeks, but you'll live. The wolf made a sound low in his chest. Not quite a growl, not quite a whimper. Something else. Something that felt like gratitude? Question? Warning? I should have left then. Should have gone back to the cottage, washed the blood from my hands, and pretended this never happened. That would have been the smart thing. The safe thing. Instead, I did what I'd always done. What grandmother despaired of ever training out of me. I stayed. I'll check on you at dawn, I said softly, reaching out to rest my hand on his head. His fur was softer than I expected. Warm. Don't die between now and then. I didn't use half of grandmother's red bottle for nothing. His eyes closed. Just for a moment. And in that moment, I could have sworn I saw something shift in his face. Something too human. Too aware. But then his eyes opened again. And he was just a wolf. Just a dying animal I'd saved. I stood. Every muscle in my body protesting. Started back toward the cottage. I was 3 steps away when I heard it. A howl. Then another. Then 10, 20, 50. A chorus of voices rising from deep in the packlands, from the territory I'd been taught since childhood never to enter. The sound made my bones vibrate. Made something primal in my hindbrain scream danger, run, hide. I looked back at the wolf. He was watching me again. And this time there was no mistaking what I saw in his eyes. Recognition. And something that looked terribly like regret. I ran back to the cottage. Slammed the door. Threw the bolt. Grandmother was standing by the window, the red bottle's empty twin in her hand. How many? She asked quietly. I don't know. Dozens. Maybe. They're coming for you, she said. Not a question, a fact. By dawn, they'll be here. Why? I saved him. I just saved. You saved someone important. Grandmother finally looked at me, and her eyes were ancient, sad. Important enough that his pack will come to collect the debt, or collect you. With wolves, it's often hard to tell the difference. She crossed to me, took my blood-stained hands in hers. Listen carefully, child. When they come, and they will come, you must remember, mercy is not weakness, but it is always, always a chain. You bound yourself to that wolf the moment you chose to save him, and now, she trailed off. But I heard the unspoken end of that sentence as clearly as if she'd shouted it. Now you belong to them. Chapter 2. The 100 who came at dawn. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every sound became a threat. The wind through the trees, the settling of the cottage's old bones, the scurry of mice in the walls. Each one made me flinch. made my heart slam against my ribs like it was trying to escape my chest before the wolves arrived. Grandmother made tea. Chamomile and valerian, the kind meant to calm nerves, but my hands shook so badly I could barely hold the cup. The ceramic rattled against the saucer, a tiny percussion of fear. "Drink," she commanded, her voice softer than usual. She only got soft when things were truly bad. "What will they do?" I asked. The tea tasted like flowers and earth and something bitter I couldn't name. "When they come, what will they?" "I don't know." Grandmother settled into her chair, but she didn't pick up her knitting. Her hands lay still in her lap, and that frightened me more than anything else. Grandmother's hands were never still. Shifter law isn't like ours. Their debts are complicated. Blood debts especially. I saved his life. Yes. So, they should be grateful. They should thank me and leave. Grandmother's laugh was dry as autumn leaves. "Child, when has gratitude ever been simple? You saved someone they clearly wanted dead, or at least expected to die. You interfered, and now..." She gestured vaguely at the window, where the sky was starting to pale from black to deep blue. "Now they have to decide what that interference means." I set down my teacup before I could drop it. "You think they'll kill me?" "I think they'll claim you." She met my eyes. "There's a difference. Not always a better one, but a difference nonetheless." The first howl came just as the sun broke the horizon. It was different from the chorus last night, singular, commanding, a sound that vibrated in my chest and made every instinct I had scream submit. This was the howl of something ancient, something powerful enough that even the forest seemed to hold its breath. Then came the others. One by one at first, then in a rush 100 voices rising to meet the dawn, surrounding our cottage in a circle of sound that felt like a noose tightening. "They're here," I whispered. Grandmother stood, smoothed her skirts, and walked to the door. "Then we greet them. With dignity." "Grandmother." "With dignity, Collins." She used my full name, which meant this wasn't negotiable. "You are a healer. You acted with honor. You will not cower." She opened the door. They filled the clearing. I'd seen shifters before everyone in Millbrook had. They came to the market sometimes, trading furs and game for things they couldn't make themselves. They walked among us in human form, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, and we'd learned to lower our eyes and step aside when they passed. But I'd never seen this many in one place, never seen them in their wolf forms, a sea of fur and muscle and gleaming eyes that caught the dawn light like coins at the bottom of a well. They ranged from gray to brown to black, from the size of large dogs to creatures that could have looked a horse in the eye. They sat in perfect silence, arranged in concentric circles around our cottage, and every single one of them was staring at me. At the center of the circle, closest to our door, sat a wolf that made my saved stranger look small. He was pure white, his fur so bright in the dawn light that it almost hurt to look at. Scars crisscrossed his muzzle, his shoulders marks of battles won and survived. But it was his eyes that caught me. They were blue as winter ice, and they held an intelligence so sharp it felt like being dissected. This was an alpha. Had to be. Everything about him radiated authority, from the way he sat perfectly still, perfectly composed, to the way every other wolf oriented toward him like compass needles to north. The white wolf looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at grandmother, and dipped his head. Just slightly. A gesture of respect? Acknowledgement? Grandmother returned the gesture. "Alpha Grayson," she said, "you honor us with your presence." The white wolf's form began to shimmer. I'd heard about the change, the shift from wolf to human, but I'd never seen it. The stories didn't do it justice. It wasn't a transformation so much as a revelation, like reality was peeling away to show what had been underneath all along. Where the white wolf had sat, a man now stood. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair that caught the dawnlight the same way his fur had. His face was hard, carved from stone and iron and old wars. The scars I'd seen on his wolf form translated to his human body, thin white lines across his chest, his arms. A particularly vicious one that ran from his temple to his jaw. He wore simple clothes that someone must have brought him, dark trousers, a loose shirt, but he carried himself like a king in coronation robes. "Ruby," he said, and his voice was gravel and smoke. "It's been many years. Not long enough, if you're here with 100 wolves to intimidate an old woman and her granddaughter. Grandmother's voice was tart, unimpressed. I wanted to yank her back inside and bolt the door. How could she speak to him like that? But Alpha Grayson's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. You haven't changed. Neither have you. Still bringing an army when a conversation would suffice. The conversation requires an army. His eyes shifted to me. Your granddaughter saved someone last night. Someone who should have died. My throat went dry. I saved a wounded wolf. I didn't know. You saved my son. The words fell like stones into still water, and the ripples spread through my entire understanding of what I'd done. His son. The dying wolf had been the Alpha's son. Then you should be thanking her, Grandmother said sharply. Not surrounding her home like she's committed a crime. The thanks are why we're here. Alpha Grayson took a step forward. And despite myself, I took a step back. He noticed. Something flickered in those ice blue eyes. Disappointment? Understanding? My son was being punished. He challenged another Alpha's heir. Broke treaty law. The wounds he received were meant to be fatal. That was the judgment. My stomach dropped. I interfered with an execution. You saved his life. The Alpha's voice was neutral, giving nothing away. Which presents us with a problem. The debt he owes you is immeasurable. A life debt, we call it. And life debts must be paid. I don't want payment. I just wanted to help. That's not how it works. He gestured. And 2 wolves from the circle stood. Began walking toward me. They shifted as they moved, woman and man, both lean and dangerous, with the same golden eyes I'd seen in my dying wolf last night. You tied yourself to him, to us, whether you intended to or not. The 2 shifters stopped on either side of the Alpha. The woman spoke first, her voice rough. She smells like him. Because I treated his wounds, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, because he was bleeding out in the forest behind my home. She didn't know what she was doing, Grandmother interjected. She's human. Your laws aren't hers. But she lives on the border. The male shifter's voice was colder than the Alpha's. She knows enough to be afraid, knows enough to understand there are consequences. Alpha Grayson raised a hand, and both shifters fell silent immediately. The law is clear. A life debt must be answered. You saved my son. He now owes you his life, his service, his protection, his loyalty. Until the debt is repaid. I tried to process this. So he'll... What? Work for me? Help with chores? The female shifter made a sound that might have been a laugh. It's not servitude, girl. It's bonding. He's tied to you now. Where you go, he goes. Your enemies become his. Your battles become his. Your life becomes his priority above even his own pack. That's insane. I don't want. It doesn't matter what you want. The Alpha's voice cut through mine like a blade. You made a choice last night. Choices have weight. This is the weight of yours. There's another option, Grandmother said quietly. Too quietly. Everyone looked at her. The pack could absorb the debt, she continued. Take the girl as one of your own. Release the son from individual bonding by binding her to the whole. No, I said immediately. Grandmother, no. It would mean leaving your home, Alpha Grayson said, watching me carefully. Coming to live in pack lands. Learning our ways. Submitting to our laws. She's human, the male shifter protested. She can't shift. She'd be useless. She's a healer, Grandmother countered. A good one, better than good. She has the gift, whether you can sense it or not. Your people could use someone with her skills. We have healers. None like her. Grandmother's voice was hard. Proud. She brought someone back from death's door using herbs and will. How many of your healers can say that? The Alpha studied me like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. Can you do it again, the healing? Yes. If I have the right supplies, if I... Show me. He moved so fast I didn't have time to scream. One moment he was standing 10 feet away, the next his hand was at his belt, drawing a knife. The blade flashed in the morning light as he dragged it across his palm, deep enough that blood welled immediately, dripping onto the ground between us. Heal it, he said, extending his bleeding hand toward me. Now. My healer's instinct overrode my fear. I grabbed his wrist, pulled his hand closer to examine the wound. It was deep, clean, the cut of someone who knew exactly how much damage he was doing. It would need stitches, would scar badly if not treated properly. I looked up at him. I need my supplies. You have 30 seconds. I ran inside, grabbed my herb basket with shaking hands. Grandmother had already prepared a fresh batch of yarrow paste had she known this would happen. I snatched it, along with clean bandages and the small vial of honey we used to prevent infection. Back outside, I worked fast. Cleaned the wound with water from the pump, packed it with yarrow paste, added a thin layer of honey, then wrapped it tightly in bandages. The whole thing took maybe 2 minutes. Alpha Grayson watched the entire time, his expression unreadable. When I tied off the bandage, he flexed his hand. Testing. Then he unwrapped the bandage. The wound was already closing. Not healed, not completely, but closing faster than it should have been. The bleeding had stopped entirely. Impossible, the female shifter breathed. We heal fast, but not that fast. And she's human. She shouldn't be able to. She has the gift. The Alpha's voice was quiet, certain. He looked at me with new eyes, not threatening now, but calculating. Old magic. The kind that runs in certain bloodlines. Grandmother said nothing, but I felt her stiffen beside me. Here's my offer, Alpha Grayson said. Come with us. Live in Packlands. Learn our ways. Use your healing to serve the pack. In exchange, my son's debt becomes the pack's burden. He's free. You're protected. And you'll have resources beyond anything you'd find in this cottage. And if I refuse, then my son remains bound to you. Wherever you go, he follows. Whatever danger you face, he faces. You'll have a shifter shadow for the rest of your life. And every enemy he's made, and he's made many, will become your enemy too. It wasn't really a choice. It was a trap dressed as options. I looked at grandmother. She nodded, just once. Permission. Or maybe resignation. How long? I asked. If I come with you, how long do I have to stay? Until the debt is satisfied. Could be months. Could be years. The Alpha's expression softened, just slightly. We're not monsters, girl. You'll be treated fairly. Fed, housed, protected. You'll have freedom within Packlands. But you'll be ours. And you'll be ours. The words echoed in my head, carrying weight I didn't fully understand yet. I thought about the dying wolf in the forest. About those golden eyes watching me work, so aware, so resigned to death until I'd refused to let him go. Had he known what he was doing, crawling to die so close to my home? Had this been planned? No. The wounds had been too real. The death too close. Whatever this was, it had started with genuine chance and ended with impossible choice. I'll come, I heard myself say. But I want to see him first. Your son. I want to make sure he's recovering properly. The Alpha's eyebrows rose. You're negotiating? I'm being a healer. I lifted my chin, tried to channel grandmother's fearlessness. If I'm coming to serve your pack, then I'm going to do it properly. That means checking on my patient. For a long moment, Alpha Grayson just stared at me. Then he did something I didn't expect. He laughed. It was a rough sound, like he didn't use it often, but it was genuine. You have courage, I'll give you that. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. He turned to the female shifter. Bring Kieran forward. The circle of wolves parted, and through the gap came the wolf I'd saved. He looked better, gods, so much better. The wounds I'd packed and bandaged were already healing, the worst of them closed to angry red lines. He was standing, walking. Even if his gait was still careful. He'd survived the night. He'd survived because of me. Our eyes met, and something passed between us. Recognition, gratitude, and underneath it all, something else I couldn't name. Something that felt like the beginning of a story I hadn't agreed to be part of. He's healing well, I said, professional, detached. The wounds will need to be cleaned and redressed daily for the next week. No running, no fighting, no shifting if he can help it. The internal damage was severe. You hear that, Kieran? The Alpha's voice held dark amusement. Your healer gives orders. The black wolf. Kieran dipped his head. To me. A gesture of acknowledgement that made several other wolves shift uncomfortably. 1 hour, Alpha Grayson said to me. Gather what you need. Say your goodbyes. Then we leave. He shifted back to wolf form, and one by one, the 100 wolves who'd come at dawn began to melt back into the forest. Not leaving, just giving us space. Waiting. Grandmother took my hand. Come inside, child. We need to talk. But as I followed her back into the cottage, my home, the only place I'd ever known, I couldn't help but look back at the black wolf sitting at the edge of the clearing. He was still watching me, and somehow, I knew he wouldn't stop. Not now. Not ever. Chapter 3. The Price of Silver. Grandmother's hands were steady as she packed my bag, but her mouth was pressed into a thin line that meant she was fighting tears. I'd only seen her cry twice in my life, once when my mother died, once when my father followed her a year later. She wouldn't cry now, wouldn't give me that weight to carry. The blue vial, she said, tucking it carefully between my clothes. Use it sparingly. 3 drops in water can bring down any fever, but 4 drops will stop a heart. Grandmother, the silver tin contains moon petal salve, for wounds that won't close naturally. And this, she pressed a small leather pouch into my hands. This is Rawthorn. You'll know when to use it. When someone is beyond saving but suffering, it gives peace. I stared at the pouch. I'd never been allowed to touch Rawthorn before. It was too dangerous, too final. The fact that she was giving it to me now meant she didn't expect me to come back. I will return, I said, my voice cracking. This is just temporary, until the dead is satisfied. And then, Collins. She cupped my face in her weathered hands. Listen to me. You are walking into a world that doesn't follow human rules. You'll see things that don't make sense. You'll be asked to do things that conflict with everything I taught you. But you remember this. Healing is healing, no matter who needs it. Human, shifter, enemy, friend. Pain is pain. Suffering is suffering. You treat it all the same, even if they're cruel? Especially then. Her eyes were fierce. Cruelty comes from pain most of the time. Not always, but most. You heal the body. Sometimes you heal the thing that made them cruel in the first place. A knock at the door. Not aggressive, but firm. Time was up. Grandmother pulled me into a hug that smelled like herbs and wood smoke and home. You're stronger than you know, she whispered. Braver than you believe. And if they hurt you, if they betray you, you'll come for me with that knife you keep under your mattress? She pulled back, and her smile was sharp as broken glass. I'll come with much worse than a knife. The female shifter from earlier was waiting outside. Up close she was even more intimidating, tall, lean muscle, with scars that suggested she'd earned her place in the pack hierarchy through violence. Her golden eyes swept over me dismissively. I'm Vera, she said. Not an introduction, just a statement of fact. Beta female. Which means I answer only to the Alpha and his son. And now apparently I'm responsible for keeping you alive. I didn't ask for a bodyguard. No, you asked for nothing, which makes this whole situation more irritating. She grabbed my bag before I could protest, slinging it over her shoulder like it weighed nothing. Let's go. The pack doesn't wait. I looked back at the cottage one more time. Grandmother stood in the doorway, backlit by the hearth fire, looking small and old and indestructible all at once. She raised one hand, not a wave, a benediction. Then Vera was pulling me forward, and my home was disappearing behind the trees. The pack had reformed in the forest, still in wolf form, still numbering close to 100. They parted as we approached, creating a corridor that led deeper into the woods, deeper into their territory. Alpha Grayson stood at the head of the procession, white fur gleaming. Beside him was Kieran, the black wolf I'd saved. Even injured, even still healing, he carried himself with a confidence that spoke of status. This wasn't just the Alpha's son. This was someone who'd been raised to lead. She comes willingly, Vera announced, loud enough for the entire pack to hear, bound by debt and oath, under Alpha's protection. A ripple went through the assembled wolves. Not quite approval, not quite acceptance. Something more complicated. I was an outsider, a human, but I was also the one who'd saved their future Alpha's life. Kieran approached, his movements still careful. Up close, I could see the bandages I'd wrapped last night were gone, replaced by partially healed wounds that looked weeks old instead of hours. Shifter healing was extraordinary. He stopped directly in front of me, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Then he did something that made every wolf in the clearing go utterly still. He bowed his head, and pressed his muzzle against my palm. "What is he doing?" I whispered to Vera. Her expression was unreadable. "Acknowledging the debt. Publicly. That's not standard." "What's standard?" A nod. "Maybe a verbal thanks after he shifts." "Not this." She sounded troubled. "This is a subordinate's gesture. He's the Alpha's heir. He shouldn't be showing submission to a human." But Kieran didn't seem to care about protocol. His golden eyes met mine, and I saw something in them that made my breath catch. Not gratitude. Not submission. Possession. He thought he owned me. Or I owned him. Or we owned each other. The exact hierarchy didn't matter. What mattered was that he decided we were bound in a way that went beyond the pack's laws. "We move." Alpha Grayson's voice cut through the moment. "Collins walks with Kieran and Vera. Everyone else, standard formation. And someone shift to human. And give the girl a cloak. She'll freeze before we're halfway home." A younger wolf peeled off from the group, shifted into a lanky teenage boy, and wordlessly handed me a fur-lined cloak that smelled like pine and musk. I wrapped it around myself gratefully. The morning air was cold, and I was already shivering. Then we were moving. The pack flowed through the forest like water, utterly silent despite their numbers. Kieran stayed close to my left, Vera on my right, both of them alert in a way that made me realize just how dangerous this world was. They weren't just walking. They were guarding, constantly scanning the trees, the shadows, the spaces between. "What are you watching for?" I asked Vera, after we'd been walking for 20 minutes. "Everything." She didn't look at me. "We're in neutral territory right now. The space between our lands and 3 other packs. It's supposed to be safe. But suppose doesn't mean shit when someone wants to send a message." "A message? You really don't know anything about our world, do you?" She sighed. Kieran didn't just challenge another Alpha's heir. He humiliated him. Drew blood in front of witnesses. That heir's pack wants revenge. They agreed to the punishment, the execution attempt. But Kieran surviving complicates things. Because I saved him. Because you interfered with justice. She finally looked at me, and her expression was almost pitying. "You didn't just save one wolf's life, girl. You disrupted the balance of power between 4 packs, made enemies of people you've never met, and now you have to live with the consequences." My stomach twisted. I was just trying to help. Noble. Stupid. Same thing most of the time. She gestured at Kieran, who was ranging slightly ahead of us, his gait still uneven. He knew what he was doing when he crawled toward human lands to die. Knew there was a healer in that cottage. Knew there was a chance someone would find him. "You think he planned this?" "I think he's his father's son. And Alpha Grayson doesn't leave things to chance." She paused. "But I also think those wounds were real. The other pack's heir Damien, he's vicious. Enjoys causing pain. So maybe Kieran planned to be found. But didn't plan on being quite so close to death when it happened." We walked in silence for a while. The forest was changing around us, the trees growing larger, older, their branches interweaving overhead until only fragments of sky remained visible. This was ancient woods, the kind that existed before humans, before shifters, before anything that walked on 2 legs decided to give things names. "We're entering Packlands," Vera said quietly. "From here on, you're under absolute protection. Anyone who harms you answers to the Alpha. But that also means you're under absolute law." "What are the rules?" "Don't challenge anyone's dominance unless you're prepared to fight. Don't enter the Alpha's residence without invitation. Don't refuse a direct order from anyone ranked higher than you, which is basically everyone. Don't try to leave without permission. And most important," she stopped walking, turned to face me fully. "Don't lie. We can smell it. Every time. Lies are worse than crimes here. You can kill someone in a fair fight and be forgiven. Lie about your intentions and you'll be exiled or executed. Depends on the lie." "That seems harsh." "That's pack law." She started walking again. "You wanted to come. Now. You deal with what that means." The forest opened into a clearing, and I stopped breathing. I'd expected a village, maybe rough cabins, something primitive. What I saw instead looked like it had been carved from the forest itself. Structures that grew as much as they were built. Wood and stone blended so seamlessly it was impossible to tell where nature ended and construction began. The central building was massive, 3 stories tall, with windows that caught the late morning sun and threw it back in amber fragments. Around it, smaller dwellings clustered like children gathering around a parent. And everywhere, there were shifters. Some in wolf form, some human, some caught in between the kind of partial shift I'd heard about but never seen. A woman with wolf ears and human face, a man with human body but wolf paws for hands. Children playing tag in forms that flickered between one and the other like candle flames. "Welcome to Silverpine," Vera said. "Home of the Grayson Pack. Your prison for the foreseeable future." "You mean my new home?" "Same thing." She pointed toward the central building. "That's the Alpha's residence. You'll meet with him and the senior council after you've settled in. They need to assess you. Figure out where you fit in the hierarchy." "I'm human. I don't have a hierarchy." Vera's laugh was bitter. "Everyone has a hierarchy here. The only question is how low yours will be." We approached the central building, and I felt eyes on me from every direction. Curious, hostile, confused, 100 different reactions to the human who'd walked into their world. Some of the children pointed and whispered. An older woman spat on the ground as we passed. "Ignore them," Vera said. "They'll test you, see if you break easily. And if I do, then you'll have a very difficult time here." She stopped at the base of the stairs leading up to the main entrance. "Kieran, you're dismissed. Go to the healers, let them check your wounds properly. I'll handle the girl from here." Kieran, who'd been silent this entire time, made a low rumbling sound that might have been protest. "That's not a request," Vera snapped. "You're injured. You're heir to this pack. You're not playing bodyguard to a human when we have actual healers who need to make sure you won't drop dead from infection." Another rumble, this one more insistent. "Goddess, give me strength," Vera muttered. She looked at me. "He wants to stay with you. The debt bond is already forming. He feels responsible for your safety. Tell him I'll be fine. Tell him yourself." I turned to Kieran, this massive black wolf, who'd nearly died in the forest, who'd bowed his head to me in front of his entire pack. "Go get your wounds checked. I'll be fine. Vera won't let anything happen to me." He stared at me for a long moment. Then finally he turned and loped away, favoring his right side where the worst of the damage had been. "That was easier than expected," Vera said. "He must actually respect you, or the pain is worse than he's letting on." She led me inside, and the interior was even more impressive than the exterior. The ceiling soared above us, supported by pillars that still had bark on them, as if the trees had simply been convinced to grow in exactly the right places. Sunlight filtered through high windows, creating patterns on the stone floor that looked almost intentional. "Wait here," Vera said, gesturing to a bench near the entrance. "I need to inform the Alpha you've arrived. Don't wander. Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone, unless they talk to you first." Then she was gone, her footsteps echoing away down a corridor, and I was alone. Not quite alone. I could feel them, the pack members passing by, pausing to look at me, to scent the air near me, testing, judging. Some ignored me completely. Others stared with open hostility. One young man approached, his nostrils flaring. "You smell like him," he said. "Like Kieran, like blood and herbs," and he leaned closer, invading my space in a way that made my skin crawl. "Like claimed property." "I'm not property. You're something." "Question is what?" He circled me, predatory, his eyes shifting from brown to gold and back again. "You're not pack. You're not mate. You're not prisoner. So what are you?" "I'm a healer. We have healers." He stopped in front of me, too close. "Better ones. Ones who can shift, who understand our bodies. What use is a human?" "Apparently enough use that your Alpha brought me here." His hand shot out, grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to prove he could. "Careful, little human. That mouth will get you killed. Remove your hand." The voice came from behind me, cold, authoritative, utterly calm. "Now." The young man dropped my wrist like it had burned him. His face went pale. "Beta, I was just what? Threatening someone under Alpha protection. Testing boundaries. A woman stepped into view, and I understood immediately why the young man looked terrified. She was older than Vera, maybe in her 50s, with silver threading through her dark hair and scars that told stories of survival. But it was her eyes ice blue, the same shade as Alpha Grayson's that marked her as dangerous, as powerful. "Go find something productive to do," she said to the young man. "Before I find something for you, something involving the training grounds and my personal attention." He fled. The woman turned to me, and her expression softened fractionally. "I apologize for Garrett. He's young, stupid, and convinced he's more important than he is." She extended a hand. "I'm Lyra, Alpha's sister, second in command after my brother, and apparently, your new advocate." I took her hand carefully. Her grip was firm but not crushing. "Advocate? Someone needs to teach you how to survive here. Vera's competent, but she lacks patience. I, on the other hand, have survived 63 years in this pack by being very, very patient." She gestured for me to follow her. "Come. We have much to discuss before you meet the council. And all of it will determine whether you leave this place alive or in pieces." I followed her deeper into the building, away from the entrance, away from the judgmental eyes of the pack, and with every step, I felt the weight of my choice settling over me like a cloak made of consequences. I'd saved a life. Now I had to figure out if that salvation would cost me my own. Don't forget to subscribe. Chapter 4. The Council of Teeth and Silver. Lyra led me through corridors that twisted like the interior of a living thing, organic, intentional, designed to confuse anyone who didn't belong. We passed rooms where I caught glimpses of daily pack life. Children being taught to shift by patient elders. Warriors sparring in human form with a ferocity that made me look away. Women weaving what looked like ceremonial garments from silver thread. "The council meets in an hour," Lyra said, not slowing her pace. "That gives us time to make you presentable and teach you how not to get yourself killed in the first 5 minutes. I thought I was under Alpha protection. You are. Which means they can't kill you directly." She glanced back, one eyebrow raised. "But there are other ways to destroy someone. Words can be weapons here. Insults can start wars. And if you show weakness in front of the council, they'll spend the rest of your time here testing that weakness until you break." She stopped at a door, pushed it open. Inside was a room that looked like it had been prepared for me. A bed with clean linens. A wash basin. A wardrobe with simple but well-made clothes. A window overlooked the forest, showing the endless expanse of pack territory. "This is yours," Lyra said. "For as long as you're here. The door locks from the inside, but I wouldn't recommend using it. Locked doors suggest you have something to hide, and paranoia breeds paranoia." I set my bag down on the bed, suddenly exhausted. The morning felt like it had lasted a week. What does the council want from me? To understand you. To assess whether you're an asset or a liability. Lyra crossed to the wardrobe, began pulling out clothes, a simple dress in deep forest green, sturdy boots, a leather vest. "They'll ask about your healing abilities, your knowledge, your intentions. Some will try to intimidate you, others will try to seduce information from you with kindness. All of them will be watching for lies. Vera told me you can smell lies. We can smell the chemical changes that accompany lies: fear, stress, the spike in adrenaline. It's not perfect, but it's accurate enough." She laid the clothes on the bed, "Which means your best strategy is radical honesty. Answer every question truthfully, even if the truth makes you look bad. They'll respect that more than evasion." I picked up the dress. It was soft, well worn, clearly belonged to someone before me. Whose room was this? Lyra's expression flickered something painful, quickly hidden. "My daughter's. She died 3 years ago. Hunting accident." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She died doing what she loved, with her pack around her. There are worse deaths." Lyra moved toward the door. "Get changed. Wash your face. You smell like fear and forest. And the council responds to prey smell the way wolves always do with hunger. I'll be back in 40 minutes. She left before I could ask what happened in a hunting accident that killed a shifter creatures who could heal from almost anything, who were stronger and faster than any natural predator. I changed quickly, grateful to be out of my blood-stained clothes from last night. The dress fit reasonably well, a little loose in some places but comfortable. The boots were perfect, like they'd been made for my feet. I washed my face and hands in the basin, watching the water turn pink with Kieran's blood, with the evidence of last night's impossible choice. A knock at the door. Too soon to be Lyra. "Come in," I called, bracing myself. The door opened, and Kieran stepped through. He was in human form now, the first time I'd seen him this way. And goddess help me, he was beautiful in a way that made my healer's clinical detachment crumble like wet paper. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with black hair that fell to his shoulders and those same golden eyes that had watched me work in the forest. His face was sharp planes and strong bones, with a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled. The wounds I'd treated were visible, angry red lines across his ribs, his shoulder, his forearm. Still healing, but healing wrong. Too fast, without proper care. "You shouldn't be here," I said, falling back on professional disapproval. "Those wounds need to be cleaned and dressed properly. Where are your pack healers?" "Busy." His voice was deep, rough, like he didn't use it often. "And I don't trust them the way I trust you. You don't know me. I know you saved my life when you had no reason to, when it would have been safer to let me die." He moved closer, and I noticed he was favoring his right side. The internal damage was still there, still causing pain. "I know you used something rare and valuable to heal me. Your grandmother's red bottle. Lyra told me what that costs. What it means. It means I'm a healer. That's what we do." "No." He was close enough now that I could see the flecks of amber in his golden eyes. "That's what you do. Most healers have limits, lines they won't cross. You don't seem to have those. Everyone has limits. Then I haven't found yours yet." He reached out, his fingers hovering near the bandage I'd wrapped around Alpha Grayson's hand this morning, the one he'd cut to test me. "You healed my father without hesitation, touched him without fear. Do you know how many people would have refused? How many have refused? I was proving I could be useful. You were proving you're either incredibly brave or incredibly reckless." His hand dropped. "The council will want to know which. So will I." I stepped back, putting space between us. He was too intense, too focused, like I was a problem he needed to solve. "Why are you really here?" "Kieran, your aunt is coming back soon, and I doubt she'll approve of you visiting my room alone. I came to warn you." His expression turned serious. "The council has 7 members, my father, Lyra, Vera, 3 senior pack members, and Damien." My blood went cold. "The heir who tried to kill you?" "The same. He's here under treaty obligations. His pack and ours share hunting grounds, share resources. We're allies technically, which means he gets a seat at our council table." Kieran's jaw tightened. "He'll be the most dangerous person in that room. He'll try to undermine you, discredit you, turn the council against you. Because if they reject you, if they decide you're not worth protecting, then I'm fair game for his revenge." "Exactly." He moved to the window, looked out over the packlands. "He can't touch you while you're under my father's protection. But if the council votes to revoke that protection, if they decide you're more trouble than you're worth, he'll kill me. He'll do worse than kill you." Kieran's voice was flat. "He likes to take his time, likes to make examples. And you humiliated him by saving me. That's not something he'll forgive." I sat down on the bed, my legs suddenly unsteady. "So what do I do?" "Be useful. Be impressive. Show them you're worth the political complication of keeping you alive." He turned back to me. "And when Damien tries to provoke you, and he will, don't take the bait. He wants you to show aggression, to threaten him, to give him an excuse to challenge you. I'm human. I can't challenge him. No, but I can. That's what he's counting on." Kieran's expression was grim. "If you show any sign of being mine, of belonging to me in any way, he'll force a challenge. He'll make me fight him again, this time to the death. And in my current condition, you'd lose. I'd die," he said. It matter-of-factly, like death was just another possibility to plan around. "So we need to be very careful about how we interact in front of the council. No familiarity, no protection. I'll advocate for you as my father's heir, but I can't show personal investment. Understand?" I understood. I was alone in this. Whatever connection had formed between us in the forest, whatever debt bound us together, it had to remain invisible, had to remain unspoken. "I understand," I said quietly. He nodded, started toward the door, then stopped. The riddle you asked me. In the forest, while you were healing me. I'd forgotten about that. I'd been trying to keep him conscious, keep him focused on something other than pain. I'd asked him an old riddle my grandmother had taught me. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening, but can also walk on no legs at all? You never answered it, I said. Because I didn't know the answer. I still don't. His golden eyes met mine. But I'd like to. When this is over, when we're both still alive, tell me. Then he was gone. The door closing softly behind him, and I was left with the strange sensation that something important had just happened. Something I didn't fully understand yet. Lyra returned exactly 40 minutes after she'd left, her timing precise. She looked me over, nodded approval. Better. You look like someone who belongs here, even if you don't. Kieran came to see me. Her expression sharpened. Did he? What did he want? To warn me about Damien. Good. That means he's thinking strategically, instead of emotionally. She gestured for me to follow her. The council chamber is in the heart of the building. Once we enter, you don't speak unless directly addressed. You stand. You don't sit. Sitting suggests equality. And you haven't earned that yet. And most importantly, you keep your eyes lowered. Not in submission, but in respect. There's a difference. We walked through more corridors, descending now, going deeper into the building. The air grew cooler, heavier, like the weight of stone and earth pressing down. Finally, we reached a door made of dark wood reinforced with silver, actual silver, worked into patterns that looked like Celtic knots or protection sigils. Ready? Lyra asked. No. Good. That's honest. She pushed open the door. Remember truth, respect, and don't let them smell your fear, even if you're terrified. The council chamber was circular, carved from stone that looked older than the building around it. 7 chairs arranged in a semicircle, all of them occupied. 7 pairs of eyes turning to assess me as I entered. Alpha Grayson sat at the center, still in human form, his silver hair catching the light from torches mounted on the walls. To his right was Lyra, taking her seat with easy authority. To his left was Vera, her expression neutral but her posture alert. The 3 senior pack members I didn't recognize. 2 men and a woman. All middle-aged. All watching me with the careful assessment of people who'd survived decades. In a world where weakness meant death. And then there was Damien. He sat at the far left, deliberately separated from the others. And he was possibly the most beautiful person I'd ever seen. Golden hair that looked like captured sunlight, features so perfect they seemed carved by an artist. A smile that would have been charming if not for the cruelty in his ice-blue eyes. He was the one who'd tried to kill Kieran, who'd carved those precise, fatal wounds, who would happily do worse to me if given the chance. Collins of Millbrook. Alpha Grayson's voice filled the chamber. You stand before the Council of Silverpine Pack. You've been brought here under terms of life debt, having saved the life of my heir. The council will now determine your value, your place, and your fate. Do you accept the council's authority? I remembered Lyra's advice. Truth. Always truth. I accept the council's authority within reason, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm not Pack. I'm not bound by all your laws. But I respect them. And I'll abide by them as long as they don't contradict my fundamental nature as a healer. A ripple went through the council. Several members exchanged glances. Interesting, one of the senior men said. She's already negotiating boundaries. She's establishing that she has principles, Lyra countered. That's different than negotiation. Let's test those principles, Damien said, his voice smooth as honey over broken glass. He leaned forward, his smile widening. Tell me, Collins of Millbrook, when you found Kieran dying in the forest, did you know who he was? No. Did you know what he'd done? The challenge he'd issued? The treaty he'd violated? No. So you saved a criminal. Someone who'd been justly sentenced to death for breaking sacred law. Damien's eyes glittered. Doesn't that make you complicit in his crime? I saved a dying creature, I said carefully. I don't have the authority or the knowledge to judge pack law. I only know the laws of healing. Treat suffering where you find it, preserve life when possible, cause no harm. Even when that life threatens the peace between our packs? Even then. I met his eyes, refusing to look away even though every instinct screamed at me to submit. I'm a healer, not a judge, not an executioner. If you wanted Kieran dead, you should have made sure I couldn't find him. The chamber went silent. Then Alpha Grayson laughed, a genuine surprise sound. She has teeth after all. I was beginning to wonder. Teeth that will get her killed, Damien said coldly. She's disrespectful. Arrogant. And she's human. What possible use could she be to your pack? That's what we're here to determine. The senior woman spoke for the first time, her voice measured. Collins, demonstrate your healing knowledge. What would you do for a shifter with silver poisoning? The question was a test. Silver was toxic to shifters, burned them from the inside. I'd never treated it, but grandmother had taught me the theory. Induce vomiting immediately, I said. Then activated charcoal to absorb what's left in the system. Milk thistle tincture to protect the liver. Cold compress on the abdomen to slow absorption. And I hesitated, but committed to the truth. If the poisoning is severe, if it's reached the bloodstream, you'd need to do a partial transfusion. Replace the contaminated blood with clean. It's dangerous, but it's the only way to save them once silver reaches the heart. Another silence. Then the woman nodded. That's correct. More than correct, that's advanced knowledge. Where did you learn transfusion technique? My grandmother. She learned it from her grandmother, who learned it from the old healers before the packs claimed these territories. I didn't mention that grandmother had learned it from a shifter healer decades ago. During a brief period of cooperation between our peoples, some truths were dangerous. One more question, Damien said, his voice deceptively casual. Kieran, do you feel anything for him? Any attachment beyond professional obligation? The trap was obvious. Say yes, and he'd have grounds to challenge Kieran. Say no, and I'd undermine the life debt that protected me. I feel responsible for his recovery, I said carefully. The same way I'd feel responsible for any patient. His wounds were severe. If they're not properly cared for, if infection sets in, or internal damage worsens, my work will have been wasted. That matters to me. But it's not personal. It's professional pride. Professional pride, Damien repeated, tasting the words. How sterile. That's what makes her valuable, Lyra interjected. She doesn't have pack politics clouding her judgment. She treats based on need, not loyalty. That's rare. The council members conferred in low voices, speaking too quietly for me to hear. I stood there, trying to keep my breathing steady, trying not to show how terrified I was. Finally, Alpha Grayson raised his hand, and the chamber fell silent again. The council has reached a decision, he said. Collins of Millbrook will remain under pack protection. She will serve as auxiliary healer, working under the supervision of our primary healers. She will be housed, fed, and granted limited freedom within pack territory. In exchange, she will provide healing services as needed, and will submit to periodic evaluation of her skills and loyalty. Relief flooded through me so intensely I nearly swayed. However, Alpha Grayson continued, and the relief turned to ice. She will also serve a secondary function. As the one who saved my heir, she is uniquely positioned to monitor his recovery. She will report weekly to this council on his condition, his healing progress, and any concerning changes. This will continue until we are satisfied he has fully recovered. I understood what he was really saying. I was to be a spy. A way to keep watch on Kieran without it seeming like surveillance. I accept these terms, I said. Because what choice did I have? Then this council is concluded. Alpha Grayson stood, and everyone else followed. Lyra will show you to the healing quarters and introduce you to our primary healers. Welcome to Silverpine, Collins. Try not to make me regret this decision. The council members began filing out. Damien was the last to leave, and as he passed me, he leaned in close enough that only I could hear. You're clever, he whispered. But cleverness isn't armor. Sooner or later you'll slip. And when you do, I'll be waiting. Then he was gone, and I was left standing in the empty chamber with Lyra. You did well, she said. Better than I expected. Most humans would have broken under Damien's questioning. I was terrified. Yes, but you didn't show it. That's what matters. She placed a hand on my shoulder, surprisingly gentle. Come. Let me introduce you to the people who will determine whether you're competent or a fraud, and pray it's the former, because our healers don't tolerate incompetence. As we left the council chamber, climbing back toward the light, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just survived one test only to be thrown into another. And somewhere in this building, Kieran was recovering from wounds he'd earned by breaking their laws. Wounds that had brought me here. Wounds that connected us in ways I was only beginning to understand. The riddle I'd asked him echoed in my mind. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening, but can also walk on no legs at all? I'd never told him the answer. A promise. Something that starts on shaky legs, stands firm when needed, and leans on support when weak. But a promise could also walk on no legs at all, could exist purely in words, in intention, in the space between what was said and what was meant. I'd made a promise in the forest when I'd chosen to save him. Had bound myself to consequences I couldn't yet see, and now I had to keep that promise alive long enough to discover what it would cost me. Chapter 5. The Healing Quarters and Broken Trust. The healing quarters occupied the entire eastern wing of the main building, and the smell hit me before we even entered herbs and antiseptic, blood and sweat, the underlying copper tang of pain that no amount of cleaning could completely erase. This is the heart of pack survival, Lyra said as she pushed open the double doors. We're warriors. We hunt, we fight, we defend our territory, which means we bleed. A lot. Our healers keep us alive long enough to heal naturally, and sometimes they do more than that. Inside was organized chaos. The main room was large, filled with beds separated by curtains. Several were occupied, a young woman with bandages wrapped around her torso, an older man whose leg was splinted and elevated, a child sleeping fitfully while someone sat beside them. Along the walls were shelves stocked with supplies that made my fingers itch with professional curiosity. Herbs I recognized and some I didn't. Bottles of tinctures and salves. Instruments that looked surgical, some of them stained despite obvious cleaning attempts. Rowan! Lyra called out. Stop hiding and come meet our new auxiliary healer. A woman emerged from a back room, wiping her hands on a blood-stained apron. She was perhaps 40, with auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun, and sharp green eyes that assessed me in seconds. She was human, I could tell by the lack of that predatory grace all shifters carried, by the way she moved with careful deliberation instead of fluid confidence. This is the girl who saved Kieran? Rowan's voice was clipped, professional. The one who used Ruby's red bottle? The same, Lyra confirmed. Rowan circled me slowly, like I was a specimen to be examined. You're young. Too young to have the kind of skill that work required. Who trained you? My grandmother, Ruby of Millbrook. I know who Ruby is. Trained under old Sarah, who trained under the hedge witches before the Great Purge. Rowan stopped in front of me, arms crossed. That's a good lineage. Means you might actually know something useful instead of just folklore and hope. She gestured to the occupied beds. What do you see? Another test. I moved to the nearest bed, the young woman with the torso bandages. She was awake, her breathing shallow and controlled in a way that suggested broken ribs. May I? I asked her. She glanced at Rowan, who nodded. I gently pulled back the blanket, examined the bandaging. It was competent, work, clean, properly wrapped, with what looked like a poultice underneath. Crushed ribs, I said. At least 3, possibly 4. The bandaging is good, but the poultice is wrong. You've used comfrey, which is correct for bone healing, but you've mixed it with calendula. That's for skin wounds. For internal bone work, you want comfrey with horsetail and nettle. They help calcium absorption and reduce internal inflammation. Rowan's expression didn't change. Continue. I moved to the older man. His leg was obviously broken, the splint professional. But when I got close enough, I smelled something wrong. Something sweet and rotten underneath the clean bandages. Infection, I said immediately. Early stage, but it's there. The bone probably broke through the skin initially, introduced bacteria. You'll need to reopen the wound. Clean it with. I paused, thinking. Do you have access to honey? Real honey, not processed? We keep bees, Rowan said. Why honey? It's naturally antibacterial, better than most medicines for preventing infection from spreading, and it promotes healing. Pack the wound with honey after cleaning, then seal it. Change the dressing twice daily. I looked at the man's face. He was sweating despite the cool temperature. He'll need fever management too. Willow bark tea, cold compresses. If the fever spikes above what's normal for shifters, you might need something stronger. And the child? Rowan asked. I approached the small bed carefully. The child couldn't be more than 6, curled on their side, trembling even in sleep. I didn't see obvious wounds, but their breathing was labored, wheezing. Chest infection, I said quietly. Possibly pneumonia. But there's something else. I leaned closer, examining their neck, their face. There were faint marks around their throat, like bruising. Were they choked? Strangled? Training accident, Rowan said, her voice tight. The child shifted for the first time, panicked, tried to run. An adult grabbed them to keep them from fleeing into the forest, was rougher than intended. I fought back anger. Accidents happened, but this child was suffering because of someone's carelessness. Their airway is inflamed. The infection is secondary to the trauma. They need eucalyptus steam to open the passages, honey and lemon for the throat, and someone needs to monitor them constantly. If their breathing gets worse, if the wheezing turns to crackling, it means fluid in the lungs. That's deadly for someone this small. Rowan studied me for a long moment. Then she turned to Lyra. She'll do. Knows her herbs, reads wounds correctly, thinks practically. Better trained than half the healers we've had come through here. High praise from you, Lyra said dryly. Don't let it inflate her ego. Rowan turned back to me. You'll work under my supervision. I'm head healer here. Have been for 15 years. What I say goes. You question me, you do it privately. You disagree with treatment, you present your case with evidence. You try to undermine me in front of patients, and I'll make sure you're scrubbing bedpans until your hands bleed. Understand? Understood. Good. She pulled off her bloody apron, handed it to me. Put this on. We have work to do. And I'm not wasting time on gentle introductions. The young woman needs her poultice changed. The man needs his wound cleaned and repacked. The child needs constant monitoring. You take the first watch 4 hours. I'll show you where supplies are kept, and then you're on your own. Lyra touched my shoulder. You're in capable hands. Rowan is harsh, but she's the best healer in 3 territories. Learn from her. Then she was gone, and I was left with Rowan, who was already moving toward the supply room with the expectation that I'd follow. Question, I said as I caught up to her. Why are you human? Why would a pack keep a human healer when shifters heal naturally? Rowan pulled open a cabinet, began gathering supplies. Because natural healing has limits. Shifters heal fast, yes, but they can still die. Silver poisoning, head trauma, certain infections, their bodies can't outpace those. And shifter healers, the ones with the gift, they're rare. Most packs have 1, maybe 2. Not enough to handle the casualties from territorial disputes, hunting accidents, training injuries. She thrust a basket into my arms, began filling it with jars and bottles. Human healers are expendable. We can't shift, can't fight, can't contribute to pack strength. But we can set bones, treat wounds, keep people alive, so they tolerate us, keep us around like useful tools. There was bitterness in her voice, years of it, layered and deep. How long have you been here? I asked quietly. 17 years. Came as a prisoner during a raid on my village. Proved I had value, so they kept me alive. She handed me a jar of honey. Don't pity me. I've had a longer life here than I would have had anywhere else. And I've saved more lives than I can count. That matters more than freedom. She said it like she believed it, like she'd had to believe it to survive. Now, she continued, her voice turning brisk again. Comfrey is on the 3rd shelf, horsetail in the blue jar, nettle dried and ground in the tin. Mix equal parts, add enough honey to make a paste. You have 10 minutes. Go. I worked quickly, grinding herbs in the mortar she provided, mixing the paste exactly as grandmother had taught me. My hands moved with muscle memory, the familiar motions calming my racing thoughts. Rowan watched the entire time, her sharp eyes catching every movement. When I finished, she took the bowl, smelled it, dipped 1 finger in to test the consistency. Adequate, she said. Now apply it. And while you work, I'll tell you the real rules of surviving here. I followed her back to the main room, to the young woman with the broken ribs. Rowan helped her sit up while I carefully removed the old bandages, cleaned the skin underneath, and applied the new poultice. Rule 1, Rowan said quietly, her voice pitched so only I could hear. Never get attached. Not to patients, not to pack members, not to anyone. Attachments make you vulnerable, and vulnerability gets exploited. That seems impossible, I murmured as I worked. How do you care for someone without caring about them? Practice, years of it. She handed me fresh bandages. Rule 2, always have an escape plan. Know where the exits are, where the supplies are stored, where you could run if things go bad. This place might seem stable, but pack politics shift like wind. One day you're valued, the next you're expendable. Comforting. Truth isn't meant to comfort. It's meant to keep you alive. She watched me wrap the bandages, nodded approval when I finished. Rule 3, and this is the most important, never get involved in pack disputes. If two shifters are fighting, you let them. If someone is being punished, you don't interfere. You keep your head down, your mouth shut, and your hands busy. The moment you take sides, you become a target. I thought about Kieran, about how I'd already taken sides by saving him. What if it's too late for that? Rowan's expression turned grim. Then you pray your usefulness outweighs your complications. And you watch your back every single second. We moved to the older man next. Rowan showed me how to carefully remove the splint, how to clean the wound without causing more damage. The infection was worse than I'd thought, angry red spreading from the break site, heat radiating from the inflamed tissue. This will hurt, I warned him. He just nodded, his jaw tight. Shifters had impressive pain tolerance, but even they had limits. I cleaned the wound as gently as possible, applied the honey pack, then helped Rowan reset the splint. The man never made a sound, but sweat poured down his face, and his hands gripped the bed frame hard enough to crack the wood. You did well, Rowan told him. The infection should clear in a few days. If it doesn't, we'll need to try something stronger. Thank you, healer, he said, his voice strained. Then he looked at me. Both of you. It was a small thing, that acknowledgement. But it felt significant the first time a pack member had spoken to me with something other than suspicion or hostility. We spent the next 2 hours treating other patients, showing me the rhythms of the healing quarters. Rowan was a harsh teacher, but a thorough one. She explained everything she did, asked me to diagnose before she revealed the treatment, corrected my mistakes without cruelty. I was starting to think I might actually survive here when the doors burst open and Vera rushed in, her expression urgent. Rowan, we need you. Training accident, multiple casualties. Rowan's demeanor changed instantly. All business. How many? 4 injured, 2 critical. Vera's eyes flicked to me. And Kieran's one of them. My heart stopped. What happened? He was supervising sparring drills. One of the younger males got aggressive, shifted partially, lost control. Kieran intervened, his wounds reopened, and Vera's jaw tightened. It's bad. I told him not to shift, I said, already moving toward the door. I told him his injuries needed time. You don't give orders to the Alpha's heir, Rowan snapped, but she was moving too, grabbing supplies. Vera, have them brought here. Collins, get the surgical instruments ready. If his wounds reopened, he's bleeding internally. The next 10 minutes were chaos. 4 wolves carried in on stretchers, all of them damaged in different ways. 2 had slash wounds from claws. 1 had what looked like a dislocated shoulder, and Kieran was unconscious, his shirt soaked with blood, his breathing shallow and rattling in a way that made my healer's instincts scream danger. The 2 with slashes can wait, Rowan said immediately, assessing. The dislocation is painful but not deadly. But him. She pointed at Kieran. We operate now or he dies. Collins with me? Vera, clear everyone else out. I'm staying, Vera said. Then stay quiet and useful or get out. We moved Kieran to the surgical table in the back room, a flat stone surface that could be cleaned easily, surrounded by instruments that looked medieval and modern all at once. Rowan cut away his shirt, revealing the damage. The wound across his ribs had torn open completely, and the internal stitching I'd done in the forest with grandmother's red bottle had failed. I could see exposed muscle, possibly lung tissue. We need to stabilize him, Rowan said, her hands already moving, pressing bandages to slow the bleeding. Collins, I need you to prepare the clotting agent wolfsbane powder mixed with silver dust. It burns, but it seals shifter wounds when nothing else will. That's poisonous. In large doses, yes. In small amounts applied topically, it cauterizes. Now move. I found the supplies she'd indicated, my hands shaking as I mixed them. The combination created a gray paste that smelled acrid, wrong. But I trusted Rowan's experience over my own fear. Apply it directly to the wound, Rowan instructed. Pack it in, don't be gentle. We need to stop the bleeding before we can repair the damage. I did as she said, and Kieran's body convulsed even though he was unconscious. The paste burned on contact, smoke actually rising from where it touched his exposed flesh. It was horrific, brutal, and absolutely necessary. Good, Rowan said. Now we sew. I'll do the internal work, you handle the external layers. Match my rhythm. We worked in tandem, our needles moving in synchronization. Rowan's hands were steady, practiced, utterly confident. Mine trembled at first, but muscle memory took over. This was what I'd been trained for. This was what I knew. Time became meaningless. There was only the wound, the thread, the desperate need to hold together something that wanted to fall apart. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 45 minutes, Rowan tied off her last stitch. Done. He'll live. I finished my external stitching, then stepped back, my hands covered in blood, my entire body shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. Kieran was still unconscious, but his breathing had stabilized. The color was returning to his face. He'd survive. What the hell was he thinking? I demanded, the fear transforming into anger now that the crisis had passed. He was told not to shift, not to strain himself. Why would he? Because he's the Alpha's heir, Vera said quietly. Because he's responsible for training the younger pack members. Because stopping them from killing each other is more important than his own recovery. That's idiotic. That's duty. Vera looked at Kieran with something almost like respect. He knew the risks. Did it anyway. He almost died, I said. Again. Because I saved him the first time. How is that? I stopped, suddenly understanding. This was my fault. By saving him in the forest, I'd given him back his life, his responsibilities, his duty, and those things were killing him just as surely as Damien's initial wounds would have. This is what you signed up for, Rowan said, not unkindly. You saved him. Now you have to keep saving him. Over and over, until either the debt is satisfied or one of you dies. That's how life debts work. I looked at Kieran, unconscious on the surgical table, his body held together by my stitches and Rowan's expertise. He was beautiful, even like this, vulnerable, damaged, fighting to survive against impossible odds. And I realized with a cold, terrible certainty that I was already attached. Already involved in a way that violated every survival rule Rowan had given me. Already doomed. How long before he wakes up? I asked quietly. Hours. Maybe longer. Shifter bodies need time to process the wolfsbane. Rowan began cleaning her instruments. Her movements automatic. You should rest. You've been standing for 6 hours straight, and you're about to collapse. I'll stay with him. Collins, I'll stay. My voice was firm. He's my patient, my responsibility. I stay. Rowan and Vera exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. Then Rowan sighed. Fine. But if he wakes up and tries to shift again, you call for me immediately. Don't try to stop him yourself. He's dangerous, even when he's injured. They left, and I was alone with Kieran in the quiet surgical room. I pulled a chair next to the table, sat down, and let myself finally feel the weight of everything that had happened since last night. The fear, the exhaustion, the impossible choice that had led me here. You're an idiot, I told his unconscious form. A brave, dutiful, self-sacrificing idiot. And now I'm stuck keeping you alive whether you want to stay alive or not. His hand was closest to me, lying palm up on the table. Without thinking, I reached out and took it. His skin was warm, calloused, surprisingly gentle, looking for someone who fought for a living. The answer is a promise, I whispered, giving him the riddle's solution, even though he couldn't hear. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, 3 legs in the evening, and sometimes on no legs at all? A promise. Because promises start shaky, stand firm when needed, and sometimes need support, but they can also exist without any foundation, just words and intention and faith. I squeezed his hand. I made you a promise in the forest, that you wouldn't die. I intend to keep it. So you need to stop trying to kill yourself. Doing your duty. Deal? His hand twitched in mine. Just slightly. And I chose to believe it was agreement. Chapter 6. Kieran woke at dawn. I'd fallen asleep in the chair beside him, my head resting on my folded arms on the edge of the surgical table, my hand still holding his. The movement of his fingers threading through mine pulled me from dreams of blood and silver and wolves with golden eyes. You stayed, he said, his voice rough with disuse and pain. I sat up quickly, professional instinct overriding exhaustion. You reopened your wounds. Internal damage was extensive. Rowan and I operated for over an hour. I pulled my hand away, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the gesture. How do you feel? Like I was gutted and put back together with fire. He tried to sit up, winced, fell back. How bad? Bad enough that you'll be confined to bed rest for at least a week. Bad enough that if you shift again before you're fully healed, the damage might be permanent. I stood, began checking his bandages with clinical detachment. Bad enough that I'm seriously questioning whether saving you in the forest was worth the trouble. His mouth quirked. Almost a smile. That honest with all your patients? Only the ones stupid enough to re-injure themselves less than 24 hours after surgery. I had responsibilities. You had a death wish. I pulled back the bandage, examined the stitching. It was holding, but the tissue around it was angry, inflamed. The training could have been supervised by someone else. The young wolves could have been disciplined by your father. But you chose to put yourself in danger, because you can't stand the thought of appearing weak. I am weak. His voice was flat. I lost to Damien. Badly enough that I should have died. And now everyone knows it. I met his eyes, saw the shame there. The self-loathing. It was familiar. I'd seen it in my own reflection often enough. The knowledge that you weren't enough, didn't measure up, had failed in some fundamental way. You're not weak, I said quietly. You're recovering. There's a difference. Not in pack culture. Weakness is death. Weakness means losing your position, your respect, your right to lead. He looked away. I shouldn't have survived. You shouldn't have saved me. It would have been cleaner. Cleaner for who? For Damien, who gets to eliminate a rival. For your father, who loses his heir. For the pack, who loses their future alpha. I applied fresh salve to his wounds. My movements, perhaps rougher than necessary, or cleaner for you, because death is easier than dealing with the consequences of living. You don't understand. No, I don't. I don't understand a culture that values death over healing, pride over survival, reputation over actual life. I finished bandaging him, stepped back, but I understand patients who give up, who decide they're not worth saving, and I don't tolerate it. So whatever self-destructive spiral you're in, get out of it. Because I didn't waste grandmother's red bottle, didn't use up irreplaceable resources, didn't risk my own safety to save you just so you could throw your life away in a training accident. Silence. Long and heavy. Then, you're angry with me. I'm furious with you. I turned away. Began cleaning the surgical instruments to give my hands something to do. You came to my room yesterday. Warned me about Damien, about the council, about all the ways this place could kill me. Made me promise to be careful. And then you did the exact opposite, threw yourself into danger, ignored your own limitations, almost died, again. I'm sorry. I don't want your apology. I want your cooperation. I set down the instrument I'd been cleaning before I broke it. You asked me about the riddle. In the forest. I never told you the answer. A promise, he said quietly. You told me while I was unconscious. I heard you. I turned back to him. Startled. You were awake? Barely. Drifting in and out. But I heard enough. His golden eyes found mine. You made me a promise. That I wouldn't die. And you're angry, because I almost made you break it. Yes. Then I'll make you one in return. He struggled to sit up, and this time I moved to help him, adjusting pillows behind his back. I'll cooperate. I'll follow your medical advice, I'll rest, I'll heal, I'll stop trying to prove I'm strong enough to lead when I'm barely strong enough to stand. But only if you promise me something. What? When the council asks you about my recovery and they will tell them the truth. Don't protect me. Don't downplay the severity. If I'm weak, let them know it. His voice was hard. I won't have my position handed to me because people are afraid to tell my father I'm not fit to lead. That's ridiculous. That's integrity. He caught my wrist, his grip gentle but insistent. Promise me, Collins. The same way I'm promising you. Truth for truth. I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him that honesty would destroy him. That the council would use any weakness against him. That Damien would capitalize on every moment of vulnerability. But I'd been raised to value truth above comfort. Grandmother had taught me that lies, even kind ones, were poison. I promise, I said, but you have to actually give me a chance to report improvement, which means you have to heal properly. Deal. He released my wrist. How long before I can resume light duty? Weeks. A month. Probably. He closed his eyes, his jaw tight. I don't have a month. Why not? The challenge can be renewed. Damien's pack is here for the autumn gathering, 2 weeks where our packs share territory, hunt together, solidify alliances. If I'm not strong enough to defend my position during that time, Damien can issue another challenge. And this time, the council won't stop him. My blood went cold. He'll kill you. He'll try. Whether he succeeds depends on how well you do your job. He opened his eyes, and there was something almost like hope in them. Can you get me combat ready in 2 weeks? I thought about the damage. The torn muscles, the internal injuries. The fact that his body was already compromised from the first attack. Maybe. If you follow every instruction I give you. If you don't push yourself too hard too fast. If we're very, very lucky, then we'd better start now. You just woke up from emergency surgery. And I have 14 days to recover enough to survive another attempt on my life. Time isn't a luxury I have. He swung his legs over the side of the table, grimaced at the pain but didn't stop. What's the treatment plan? I wanted to push him back down, to force him to rest. But I saw the determination in his eyes, the desperate need to take control of something in a situation where he'd lost control of everything. Fine, I said. But we do this my way, which means I'm with you constantly, monitoring your progress, adjusting treatment, making sure you don't overtrain. You become my only patient for the next 2 weeks. Deal? That will cause talk. Let it. I crossed my arms. You're the Alpha's heir. I'm the healer who saved you. Of course I'm focused on your recovery. Anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with your father. For the first time since he'd woken up, Kieran smiled. Really smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. You're either very brave or very foolish. I'm a healer with a difficult patient. Same thing. I moved to the door. Wait here. I need to get Rowan's approval for this insane plan and gather supplies. Don't move. Don't shift. Don't even breathe too hard. Yes, healer, he said, with just enough mockery to make me want to hit him. I found Rowan in the main healing room, treating the other casualties from yesterday's training accident. She looked up when I entered, her expression knowing. He's awake, she said, not a question, and already planning to kill himself through overexertion. I need to take him on as a dedicated patient, full-time monitoring, specialized treatment plan, isolated recovery space. Rowan set down the bandage she'd been wrapping. That's highly irregular. We don't give preferential treatment based on rank. It's not preferential treatment. It's medical necessity. He has 2 weeks before Damien can challenge him again. If he's not recovered enough to defend himself, he dies. And I didn't save him twice just to watch him die in 2 weeks. Personal investment is dangerous here, Collins. I warned you. I know what you warned me. I'm choosing to ignore it. I met her eyes. I made a promise. I intend to keep it. Will you approve the treatment plan, or do I need to go over your head to the Alpha? For a long moment, Rowan just stared at me. Then she laughed a short, sharp sound. You really are Ruby's granddaughter. She had the same stubborn streak. Same refusal to accept that some patients can't be saved. She waved a hand dismissively. Fine. Take him. But you're responsible for everything, his recovery, his setbacks, his death, if it comes to that. And when the council asks why you're spending all your time with the heir, you tell them it's medical necessity, not personal attachment. Understood? Understood. I gathered supplies, herbs for pain management, salves for wound healing, bandages, clean water, the small vial of grandmother's remaining red bottle mixture. Everything I'd need to keep Kieran alive and functional for the next 2 weeks. When I returned to the surgical room, Kieran was standing, barely. He was leaning heavily against the table, his face pale with pain, but he was standing. What did I say about not moving? I demanded. You said don't shift, don't breathe too hard. You didn't say don't stand. He straightened slightly, trying to hide how much it hurt. Where are we doing this? Here. No. Somewhere private, where you can rest and train without an audience. I moved to his side, ducked under his arm to support his weight. Can you walk? Yes. Can you walk without collapsing? Probably. Good enough. We made our way slowly through the healing quarters, past the other patients who watched with open curiosity, out into the main corridor, where early morning sunlight streamed through the high windows. There's a recovery cabin, Kieran said, his breathing labored. On the edge of pack territory, used for isolating injured pack members who need quiet to heal. No one will bother us there. How far? 10-minute walk. Normally. He glanced down at his bandaged torso. 20 minutes at this pace. It took 30. By the time we reached the cabin, a small, well-built structure nestled at the base of an enormous oak tree, Kieran was sweating and shaking. I got him inside, onto the single bed, and immediately began checking his stitches. You tore 2 of them, I said, furious and frightened in equal measure. You couldn't wait 10 minutes for me to get a transport arranged. I needed to prove I could do it. His eyes were closed, his breathing carefully controlled. Needed to know the damage wasn't permanent. The damage will become permanent if you keep testing your limits like this. I fetched water, began cleaning the torn stitches. This is going to hurt. Everything hurts. Yes. Well, it's about to hurt more. I removed the torn stitches, cleaned the wounds that had reopened, and restitched them with hands that shook from exhaustion and adrenaline. Kieran made no sound throughout, but his hands gripped the bed frame hard enough that the wood creaked. When I finished, I sat back, wiped sweat from my forehead. No more walking, no more standing, no more anything except rest for the next 48 hours. Then we start gentle movement exercises. Stretching, breathing work, building back strength gradually. I don't have time for gradual. You don't have a choice. I stood, began organizing the supplies I'd brought. This is my medical jurisdiction. You promised to cooperate. So cooperate. He was quiet for a moment. Then, will you stay? I turned back to him. What? Here, in the cabin. There's a cot in the corner. He gestured vaguely. You said you needed to monitor me constantly. Hard to do that if you're in the main building and I'm here. He was right. It was logical, practical, medically sound. But it was also intimate in a way that made my pulse quicken. 2 weeks alone with him. No one else around. Nothing to do but heal his body and what? Talk? Learn about each other? Cross the invisible line between healer and patient into something more dangerous? People will talk, I said. Let them. He echoed my words from earlier. You're my healer. I'm your patient. Nothing improper about a healer staying close to monitor recovery. Everything about this is improper. I know. His eyes opened, found mine. But I'm asking anyway. Because I trust you more than I trust anyone else here. Because you don't have political motivations. Because when you look at me, you see a patient who needs healing, not a future alpha who needs to be strong. It was the vulnerability in his voice that decided me. The admission that he was tired of performing strength. Tired of being what everyone else needed him to be. Fine, I said. But we set boundaries. Professional boundaries. You're my patient. I'm your healer. Nothing more. Nothing more. He agreed. But even as he said it, even as I pulled the cot into a corner and began arranging my sleeping space, I knew we were both lying. The promise between us had already become something else. Something that walked on no legs at all, just words and intention. and the dangerous hope that we could both survive what came next. The first 3 days were brutal. Kieran's body fought the healing process with a stubbornness that matched his personality. Every time I changed his bandages, the wounds looked angry, inflamed, like his shifter nature was rejecting the enforced stillness his body needed. "It's the wolf," he explained on the second night, when I was applying salve for the 3rd time that day. "My wolf wants to heal through shifting, through movement. Keeping it contained is difficult. Can you feel it? The wolf, I mean. As a separate entity?" He thought about that. "Yes and no. It's me, but it's also not. Like having a second set of instincts running parallel to your human ones. Most of the time they work together. But when I'm injured, when I'm weak, the wolf fights for dominance. Wants to take over, to fix things its own way. And if you let it, I'd shift. The wounds would heal faster, but wrong. Scar tissue, permanent damage to internal structures. I'd be functional, but never at full strength." His jaw tightened. "Which is exactly what Damien is counting on. A permanently weakened opponent." I worked in silence for a moment, smoothing salve over the worst of the wounds. "Tell me about the challenge. What happened?" "Stupidity happened." His voice was bitter. "Damien's pack and mine were negotiating hunting rights. He made a comment about my sister Lyra's daughter, the one who died. Said she was weak, that her death proved our bloodline was thinning. I lost my temper. You challenged him to defend your sister's memory. I challenged him because I'm an idiot who can't control his emotions. And he destroyed me. In front of both packs, in front of witnesses, it was." He trailed off. "Humiliating doesn't begin to cover it." I finished with the salve, began rewrapping the bandages. "You loved her, your cousin, Lyra's daughter. She was like a sister to me. We trained together, hunted together. She was supposed to be one of the pack's strongest fighters." His voice cracked slightly. "And then a routine hunt went wrong. And she died. And no one will tell me exactly what happened. Just that it was an accident." I heard what he wasn't saying, that he didn't believe it was an accident. That he suspected something darker. "Is that why you accepted Damien's challenge? Not just because he insulted her, but because you think he had something to do with her death?" Kieran's eyes met mine, and in them I saw grief and rage and helpless frustration. I can't prove anything, can't accuse him without evidence. So when he gave me an excuse to fight him, I took it, and I lost. Not permanently. I tied off the bandage. "You're still alive, still healing, still have a chance to face him again. If you can get me ready in time." "I will." I said it with more confidence than I felt. "But you have to trust me. Trust my methods. Even when they seem slow. Even when your wolf is screaming at you to move faster. I trust you," he said simply. "You're the only one I do." On the 4th day, I started gentle exercises. Nothing strenuous, just stretching, controlled breathing. Getting his body used to movement again without tearing the healing tissue. We fell into a routine. Dawn. Wound assessment and fresh bandages. Morning. Stretching exercises. Midday. Herbal treatments and rest. Afternoon. More stretches. Adding resistance gradually. Evening. Meditation work, teaching him to calm the wolf, to channel his healing instead of fighting it. Nights were harder. The cabin was small, the cot and bed separated by maybe 6 feet. In the darkness, without the distraction of medical work, I was acutely aware of him, of his breathing, his occasional movements, the soft sounds he made when old nightmares woke him. "Tell me about your grandmother," he said one night, when neither of us could sleep. I lay on my cot, staring at the ceiling. "She's the strongest person I know. Survived things that should have killed her. Lost her daughter, her son-in-law, everyone she loved except me. But she kept going, kept healing people, kept teaching me, kept finding reasons to wake up every morning. She sounds remarkable. She is." I paused. "She told me once that healing is the most selfish act. That we do it because we can't stand the idea of a world with less life in it. That every patient we save is proof that death doesn't always win. Do you believe that?" "I don't know. Sometimes I think we heal because we're too stubborn to accept that some things can't be fixed. That some damage is permanent." I turned my head, could just make out his silhouette in the darkness. "Why do you fight?" Why do you want to be alpha? Because someone has to. His voice was tired. Because my father won't live forever. And when he dies, the pack needs someone who can protect them. And because... He hesitated. Because I want to change things. The way we treat humans. The way we settle disputes. It's brutal. Needlessly violent. But you can't change a system from the outside. You have to have power first. That's idealistic. That's naive, he corrected. But it's all I have. We talked for hours that night, trading stories, sharing histories, learning each other in a way that had nothing to do with wounds and healing and everything to do with understanding who we were beneath the roles we'd been forced into. And with every conversation, every shared silence, every moment of unexpected laughter, I felt the professional boundary I'd insisted on eroding like sand beneath waves. By the end of the first week, Kieran could stand without assistance, could walk the perimeter of the cabin without tearing stitches, could practice basic defensive stances without collapsing. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. But it was progress. The autumn gathering starts in 7 days, he said on the 8th morning, as I checked his wounds. They were healing well better than I'd hoped. His shifter nature was finally cooperating with my treatment instead of fighting it. I know. Damien will challenge me on the first day. It's tradition resolve disputes at the beginning so they don't poison the rest of the gathering. 7 days. I pulled back, studied him critically. Can you beat him? Honestly? I don't know. He's stronger, more experienced. I have determination, and the advantage of having nothing left to lose. He caught my hand before I could move away. But whatever happens, I need you to know you've already done more than anyone should have asked of you. If I fall, it's not your failure. Don't. I pulled my hand free. Don't start preparing me for your death. We still have 7 days. That's enough time. Collins. No. I made you a promise. I intend to keep it. I stood, began gathering supplies for the day's training. Today we add combat movements. Slow, controlled, but actual fighting technique. Your body needs to remember how to move in battle, needs to build that muscle memory back. That's aggressive. We're out of time for careful. I met his eyes. So we adapt. We push harder. And we hope it's enough. For the next 6 days, we trained like our lives depended on it. Because they did. Kieran's body responded better than I'd dared hope. The wounds held under the stress of training. His strength returned gradually, day by day, until he could move with something approaching his normal speed and power. But I could see the fear in his eyes. The knowledge that better wasn't the same as healed. That he was going into this fight still damaged, still weak, still at a disadvantage. On the final night before the gathering, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my cot, listening to Kieran's breathing, counting the hours until dawn, until the challenge, until I'd find out if everything I'd done had been enough. Collins? His voice in the darkness, soft. I'm awake. The riddle. You said the answer is a promise. What kind of promise? I thought about that. About all the promises I'd made to grandmother, to Kieran, to myself. About how promises were supposed to be solid, binding, unbreakable, but also how they could exist as nothing but intention, as hope whispered into darkness. The kind that changes everything, I finally said. The kind that you can't take back once you've made it, even if you want to. The kind that defines who you are. Silence. Then, I understand. And somehow, I knew he did. That he was thinking about his own promises to his pack, to his father, to the memory of a dead girl whose death he hadn't been able to prevent. Sleep, I said gently. You need your strength. So do you. But neither of us slept. We lay in the darkness, waiting for dawn, waiting for the moment when all our promises would be tested, and praying that when the testing came, we'd both be strong enough to keep them. Don't forget to subscribe. Chapter 7. The autumn gathering grounds were ancient, a natural amphitheater carved into the hillside, surrounded by towering pines that had witnessed centuries of challenges, treaties, and bloodshed. By the time we arrived, 3 packs had already assembled: Silver Pine, Damien's Ironwood pack, and 2 others I didn't recognize. Hundreds of shifters filled the space, their voices creating a low rumble that felt like distant thunder. The air was thick with tension, with anticipation. Everyone knew what was coming. Kieran walked beside me, and I monitored every step, every breath, looking for signs of weakness. He moved well, not perfect, not at full strength, but functional, combat-ready, if barely. "Stay close to Lyra," he said quietly as we descended into the gathering space. "Once the challenge starts, things can get chaotic. I need to know you're protected. I need to be close enough to assess if you're Collins." He stopped, turned to face me. "Please. I can't fight him if I'm worried about you." I wanted to argue, wanted to insist on my right, as his healer, to monitor the combat, but I saw the fear in his eyes, not for himself but for me. And I realized that my safety was more important to him than his own. "I'll stay with Lyra," I agreed. "But if you go down, if you're seriously injured, I'm coming into that circle whether it's allowed or not." His mouth quirked. Wouldn't expect anything less. Lyra found us before we'd gone another 10 steps. She looked battle-ready herself, dressed in leather armor that had seen use, her silver hair braided back from her face. "The challenge will be called within the hour." Damien's already posturing, making sure everyone sees how confident he is. "Let him posture," Kieran said. "Confidence won't save him. Neither will bravado." Lyra's sharp eyes assessed her nephew. "How are the wounds?" "Holding." "That's not what I asked." "They're healed enough." He met her gaze steadily. "I can do this." Lyra looked at me. "Healer's assessment?" I chose my words carefully, aware that honesty was both my obligation and a potential weapon against him. "He's recovered significantly. The wounds are stable, the internal damage has healed. He's not at full strength, probably 85% capacity, but he's functional and his technique is sound. 85%. Lyra's expression was grim. "Against an opponent at full strength." "Against an opponent who's overconfident," I corrected. "Damien thinks he's already won. Thinks Kieran is still broken." "That's an advantage. A small one." But Lyra nodded. "It'll have to be enough." She gestured toward the center of the amphitheater. "The Alpha will call the gathering to order. The challenge will be announced. Then," she glanced at Kieran, "then you either prove yourself or you die. There's no middle ground." Alpha Grayson stood at the center of the gathering space, his white hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. Around him, the senior members of all 4 packs had assembled the Council of Equals that governed inter-pack relations. "We gather under the old laws," Grayson's voice carried effortlessly across the amphitheater. 4 packs, one purpose: to maintain the peace, to share resources, to settle disputes before they become wars. He paused, his ice-blue eyes sweeping the assembled shifters. "But peace requires justice, and justice demands that challenges be answered." A ripple went through the crowd. Everyone knew what was coming. "Damien of Ironwood," Grayson called. "You have the floor." Damien stepped forward, and I felt Kieran tense beside me. Up close, Damien was even more striking than I'd remembered. Golden, and beautiful, and radiating the kind of charisma that made people want to follow him. He wore his confidence like armor. "Alpha Grayson, honored council, assembled packs." Damien's voice was smooth, practiced. 6 weeks ago, Kieran Grayson challenged me over a matter of honor. We fought. He lost. Under treaty law, his wounds were meant to be fatal, a fitting end for someone who broke sacred protocol. Murmurs of agreement from the Ironwood pack members. Kieran's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. "But he survived," Damien continued. "Through external interference." His eyes found me in the crowd, and his smile was poisonous. "He was healed. Saved. Given a second chance he didn't earn and shouldn't have received." "The healer acted according to her nature," Lyra called out. "She broke no treaty law. No, but she violated the spirit of our justice. And now we have an unresolved challenge. An opponent who should be dead, walking among us." Damien turned to face Kieran directly. "I invoke the right of renewal. The challenge stands. And this time, there will be no interference. No healing. No second chances." The crowd erupted, some in support, some in protest. Alpha Grayson raised his hand for silence. "Kieran Grayson," he said, his voice neutral. "Do you accept the renewed challenge?" This was the moment. Kieran could refuse, could admit weakness, could step down from his position as heir. It would be smart, safe, would let him live to fight another day when he was fully healed. But I knew he wouldn't. Knew before he opened his mouth that he'd accept, that he'd risk everything rather than show weakness. I accept, Kieran said clearly. Here and now. Let the challenge be resolved. The crowd roared approval. This was what they'd come for: blood, combat, the primal satisfaction of watching two strong males fight for dominance. Then let the circle be formed, Grayson said. Traditional rules, shifted combat, no interference, fight ends at submission or death. May the strongest survive. The crowd parted, creating a large circular space in the center of the amphitheater. Kieran began removing his shirt, revealing the still healing wounds across his torso. I saw several pack members exchange glances. They could see the damage, could see that he wasn't fully recovered. Damien stripped as well, and his body was unmarked, perfect, every inch a warrior in his prime. Lyra, I said urgently. This isn't fair. He's not. Fair doesn't matter, she said quietly. He accepted. Now he has to see it through. She gripped my arm. Stay with me. Watch, but don't interfere. If you step into that circle, they'll kill you, and then they'll kill him for the distraction you caused. Kieran caught my eye across the gathering space. He mouthed something I couldn't quite make out, but I understood the meaning. Trust me. Then both males shifted. The transformation was beautiful and terrible. Kieran's black wolf emerged, smaller than I remembered. The injuries had cost him mass, strength. But he moved with fluid grace, circling, assessing. Damien's wolf was massive golden brown fur, scarred muzzle, muscles that rippled with coiled power. He was larger, heavier, with reach and strength advantages that were immediately obvious. They circled each other, neither making the first move. The crowd fell silent, hundreds of shifters holding their collective breath. Then Damien lunged. He was faster than I'd expected. His jaws snapped shut inches from Kieran's throat as Kieran twisted away, using his smaller size to advantage. Damien's momentum carried him past, and Kieran darted in, teeth finding purchase on Damien's shoulder. First blood. A cheer went up from the Silverpine Pack members, but Damien barely flinched. He turned into the bite, using his weight to slam Kieran into the ground. The impact was brutal. I heard it from across the circle, heard the way Kieran's breath left him in a sharp exhale. Get up, I whispered. Please get up. Kieran rolled, avoiding Damien's follow-up attack. He was favoring his right side. The wounds were hurting him, slowing him down. Damien saw it too, saw the weakness, and pressed his advantage. The fight became vicious. Damien was relentless, attacking the injured side again and again, forcing Kieran to defend, to retreat. Blood began to flow. Both of them were wounded now, but Kieran was bleeding more, his movements getting slower. He's going to lose, someone behind me said. Should have stayed dead, another voice agreed. I wanted to scream at them, wanted to tell them that Kieran was fighting with injuries that should have been fatal, that his courage alone should earn their respect. But I bit my tongue, stayed silent, held onto Lyra's arm like it was an anchor. Damien had Kieran pinned now, his jaws closing around Kieran's throat. Not biting down yet, but the threat was clear: submit or die. The crowd began to chant. Submit, submit, submit. Kieran's golden eyes found mine across the circle, and in them, I saw something that broke my heart: resignation. Acceptance. The knowledge that he'd fought as hard as he could, and it hadn't been enough. He was going to submit. Going to lose his position, his future, his right to lead. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. Then something changed in his expression. A flash of determination, of desperate inspiration. Instead of submitting, Kieran did something completely unexpected. He went limp. Damien, surprised by the sudden lack of resistance, loosened his grip fractionally, and in that half-second of confusion, Kieran twisted, used his smaller size to slip free, and went for Damien's legs. It was a technique from human wrestling, not wolf combat, unconventional, unexpected, and it worked. Damien went down hard, his legs swept out from under him. Before he could recover, Kieran was on his back, teeth at the base of his skull, the kill spot. The crowd went silent. Yield. Kieran's voice he'd partially shifted. Enough to speak. Yield or I end this. For a long moment, nothing. Damien could keep fighting, could try to throw Kieran off, but the position was lethal. One wrong move and Kieran's jaws would snap his spine. I yield. Damien finally said, the words barely audible, but they were enough. Kieran released him, stepped back, shifted fully to human form. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds, swaying on his feet, barely conscious. But he was standing, he'd won. The Silverpine pack erupted in celebration. Alpha Grayson's expression was carefully neutral, but I saw the flash of pride in his eyes. I was moving before I consciously decided to, pushing through the crowd toward the circle. Lyra called after me, but I ignored her. Kieran was collapsing, his legs giving out, and I needed to reach him before he hit the ground. I caught him just in time, my arms around his waist, supporting his weight. Up close, the damage was worse than I'd thought. The wounds had reopened, new ones added to the old. He was bleeding badly. I won, he said, his voice slurred with pain and exhaustion. Collins, I won. You're an idiot, I said, but my voice was thick with relief and pride and fear. You're bleeding everywhere. You probably re-damaged internal organs, and you won using a wrestling technique instead of wolf combat. What were you thinking? I was thinking, he coughed, and blood flecked his lips, that I promised I wouldn't die. Had to keep that promise. Rowan appeared beside me with a stretcher and 2 assistants. Get him to the healing tent. Now. We moved Kieran carefully, aware that every jostle could worsen the internal damage. The crowd parted for us, dozens of eyes watching as we carried their victorious air away from his moment of triumph toward desperate attempts to save his life. Again, the healing tent was set up on the edge of the gathering grounds, a large structure that could handle multiple casualties. Inside, the organized chaos of medical work was already underway. Other injured fighters from preliminary challenges being treated, supplies being organized, healers conferring in low voices. We set Kieran on a surgical table, and Rowan immediately began assessment. Wounds reopened, new trauma to the rib area, possible internal bleeding. We need to operate. Again. I can. I started. No. Rowan's voice was firm. You're too emotionally involved. You'll second-guess yourself, hesitate when you shouldn't. I'll operate. You assist and monitor vital signs. Understood. I wanted to argue. But she was right. My hands were shaking, my judgment clouded by fear and attachment, and the terrible knowledge that I might lose him despite everything. Understood, I said quietly. We worked for 3 hours. Rowan's hands were steady, her technique flawless. She repaired the damaged tissue, stopped the internal bleeding, sutured torn muscles back together. I assisted, monitored, provided the supplies she needed exactly when she needed them. Kieran remained unconscious throughout, his body finally giving in to exhaustion and trauma. He'll live, Rowan finally said, tying off the last suture. But he needs complete rest. No training, no challenges, no duties for at least a month, maybe longer. Will he have permanent damage? Too soon to tell. His shifter healing should repair most of it. But there are limits. Push too hard, too fast. And yes, permanent damage is possible. She pulled off her bloody gloves, looked at me directly. You did well. Got him functional enough to win. That's more than most healers could have managed. It almost wasn't enough. But it was. That's what matters. She gestured to a chair beside Kieran's bed. Stay with him. Monitor his breathing, his color. If anything changes, call for me immediately. I need to check on the other patients. She left, and I was alone with Kieran again. Just like that first night in the surgical room, watching him breathe, counting his heartbeats, willing him to stay alive through sheer force of desperation. You kept your promise, I told his unconscious form. You stubborn, brave, ridiculous man. You kept your promise. Outside the healing tent, I heard celebration continuing, the Silverpine pack rejoicing in their heir's victory. The traditional feasting and drinking that followed major challenges. They were celebrating while their future alpha lay broken on a surgical table, held together by stitches and prayer. It should have made me angry, should have made me resent them for their callousness. But I understood, this was their way. Celebrate the victory now, mourn the cost later. Strength over sentiment. Always. Lyra entered the tent quietly, carrying a tray with food and tea. You need to eat. I need to watch him. You need to do both. She set the tray down, poured tea into 2 cups. He won, Collins. Against impossible odds. With injuries that should have crippled him. He won. That's worth celebrating. He almost died. Yes. That's what makes it worth celebrating. She pressed a cup into my hands. In our world, you're measured by what you can survive. Kieran survived the initial challenge, the execution attempt, the healing process, and now this. He's proven himself in ways that matter to pack culture. I hate your culture. So do I. Sometimes. She sipped her tea. But it's kept us alive for thousands of years. Kept us strong when gentleness would have meant extinction. You don't have to like it. You just have to understand it enough to survive it. We sat in silence for a while, drinking tea, watching Kieran breathe. The celebration outside grew louder, as night fell, as inhibitions loosened, and the traditional bonds between packs strengthened through shared intoxication. Damien left. Lyra said eventually. Took his pack and went home. He won't challenge Kieran again. He lost twice now. Once to death, and once to submission. His reputation is destroyed. Good. Maybe. Or maybe we just created a permanent enemy. Someone with nothing to lose and every reason for revenge. She stood, touched my shoulder gently. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight celebrate that your patient survived. That your promise was kept. That despite everything, you both made it through. After she left, I moved my chair closer to Kieran's bed, took his hand in mine. His skin was warm, his pulse strong and steady. All the medical indicators said he'd recover. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. That by saving him again, by pushing him to fight when he wasn't fully healed, I'd crossed some invisible line that couldn't be uncrossed. I'd promised he wouldn't die, and he hadn't. But the cost of that promise to both of us was still being calculated. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry. I pushed you so hard. I'm sorry you had to fight before you were ready. I'm sorry for all of it. His hand twitched in mine. His eyes opened, just slightly, golden irises catching the lamplight. Don't be sorry, he said, his voice barely audible. You saved me. Again. That's worth any cost. Even your health? Your future? Even that. His fingers tightened around mine. Because you gave me the chance to prove myself. To win with honor, instead of dying in shame. That's worth more than physical recovery ever could be. I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him that nothing was worth permanent damage, that pride was a poor substitute for health. But I saw the truth in his eyes. This had mattered to him in ways I didn't fully understand. Ways that had nothing to do with wounds and healing, and everything to do with who he needed to be to survive in his world. Sleep, I said gently. We'll argue about this when you're stronger. His mouth quirked. Looking forward to it. His eyes closed again, but his hand stayed in mine. And I sat there through the night, listening to the celebration outside, feeling the weight of promises kept and costs still unknown. Somewhere in the darkness, I heard wolves howling, the traditional end to a gathering, the reaffirmation of pack bonds before everyone returned to their separate territories. It sounded like mourning and celebration all at once. And I realized that's exactly what it was. Acknowledgement that survival and loss were always intertwined. That every victory carried the seeds of future pain. That promises made in desperation would always demand payment in unexpected ways. I'd saved Kieran's life twice now. Had bound myself to him through blood and medicine and stubborn refusal to let him die. But as I sat there in the quiet healing tent, his hand warm in mine, I couldn't help but wonder, who would save me when the cost of all these promises finally came due? Chapter 8. The Reckoning of Hearts. 3 weeks after the gathering, Kieran was healed enough to resume light duties. 3 weeks of monitoring, treating, watching him gradually become whole again. 3 weeks of boundaries becoming thinner, of professional distance eroding until I could no longer pretend that what I felt for him was purely clinical. And 3 weeks of increasing tension as everyone in Silverpine Pack watched us, speculated about us, whispered theories about the human healer and the Alpha's heir. The council wants to see you, Vera said one morning. appearing at the healing quarters while I was organizing supplies. Both of you. Immediately. My stomach dropped. Why? They didn't share. But Lyra looked worried. And she doesn't worry easily. Vera's golden eyes studied me. Whatever you've been doing with Kieran in that recovery cabin, people noticed. And in pack culture, attention is rarely a good thing. I found Kieran in the training yard, working through sword forms with careful precision. He'd graduated from basic movements to actual combat practice. And watching him move graceful, powerful, nearly fully recovered made something in my chest tighten. Council summons, I said, interrupting his practice. For both of us. His expression darkened. Now? Immediately, according to Vera. He sheathed his practice sword, grabbed a shirt. This is about the debt. It's been nearly 2 months. They want to know when it will be satisfied. And what do we tell them? He looked at me, and in his golden eyes I saw the same conflict I felt. The debt should have been satisfied by now. He was healed, functional, back to full strength. By all measures, my obligation had been fulfilled. But neither of us had mentioned it. Neither of us had suggested it was time for me to return to my normal duties, to stop being his dedicated healer, to step back into the boundaries we'd promised to maintain. We tell them the truth, Kieran said quietly. Whatever that is. The council chamber was as intimidating as I remembered: stone walls, torchlight, 7 pairs of eyes assessing us as we entered. But this time, the dynamic had shifted. Kieran was no longer a wounded heir fighting for recognition. He was a proven warrior who'd overcome impossible odds. And I was no longer an unknown human. I was the healer who'd made that victory possible. Collins. Kieran. Alpha Grayson's voice was neutral, giving nothing away. You stand before us to address the matter of the life debt. It's been 8 weeks since you arrived, Collins. 8 weeks of dedicated service to my son's recovery. The question before this council is, has the debt been satisfied? I glanced at Kieran, but his expression was carefully blank. No guidance there. From a medical standpoint, I said carefully, Kieran has recovered from his initial injuries. He's combat ready, functionally whole, able to resume his full duties. By that measure, yes, the debt should be considered satisfied. And yet you continue to monitor him daily, one of the senior council members observed. Continue to treat minor injuries that any of our healers could handle. Why? Because I couldn't stay away. Because every morning I needed to see that he was still breathing, still whole, still alive. Because somewhere between saving his life and watching him fight for it, my professional obligation had transformed into something far more dangerous. But I couldn't say any of that. Because major trauma like what Kieran sustained requires long-term monitoring, I said instead. Complications can arise months later. Scar tissue damage, internal adhesions, chronic pain. I'm ensuring that his recovery is complete, not just functional. How convenient. A new voice said, cold and mocking. I turned, and my blood froze. Damien stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 wolves I didn't recognize. His presence here violated the terms of his surrender. He wasn't supposed to return to Silverpine territory for at least a year. What is he doing here? Kieran demanded, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. I was invited, Damien said smoothly, stepping into the chamber like he owned it. The council requested my testimony regarding certain irregularities. What irregularities? Alpha Grayson's voice had gone dangerously quiet. The human. Damien's ice blue eyes fixed on me. She's been living alone with your son for weeks. Isolated in the recovery cabin. No supervision. No witnesses. In human culture, that would be scandalous. In ours, it suggests something far more problematic. Careful, Lyra warned. You're making accusations without evidence. Am I? Damien pulled a small vial from his pocket, held it up for everyone to see. Inside was a dark liquid that caught the torchlight. This is bloodroot extract. Rare, difficult to obtain, and known for one very specific property. It creates artificial bonding between shifters and humans. A single drop in food or drink, and the human becomes irresistible to the shifter, creates a false mate bond that can last for months. The chamber erupted. Multiple council members speaking at once, their voices overlapping in confusion and accusation. You're suggesting the girl drugged my son, Alpha Grayson's voice cut through the chaos. I'm suggesting she's had means, motive, and opportunity. Damien's smile was poisonous. She's a healer, she has access to rare substances. She's human in a pack that traditionally distrusts outsiders, she needs protection. And she's been alone with Kieran for weeks, with no one to witness their interactions. If she created an artificial bond, if she made him believe he feels something he doesn't actually feel, it would explain his unusual behavior. That's insane, I said, my voice shaking with fury. I would never. Can you prove that? Damien asked. Can you prove you didn't use something to influence him? Because from where I stand, it's extremely convenient that the Alpha's heir has become so devoted to a human healer that he can barely function without her presence. Kieran stepped forward, and the air in the chamber changed, became charged with violence barely contained. You're calling me weak, suggesting I'm so pathetically vulnerable that a human could manipulate me with herbs. I'm suggesting you were injured, vulnerable, and subjected to prolonged exposure to someone with the knowledge and ability to chemically influence your perceptions. Damien's voice was calm, reasonable, utterly convincing. It's not weakness. It's biology. Enough. Alpha Grayson stood, and everyone fell silent. These are serious accusations. If true, they would invalidate the debt bond, undermine Kieran's recent victory, and require Collins's immediate exile or execution. My heart hammered against my ribs. Execution. For something I hadn't done. Hadn't even considered doing. How do we test this? Vera asked. How do we prove or disprove the presence of Bloodroot influence? Separation, one of the senior council members said. If there's an artificial bond, it will degrade within days once they're no longer in contact. Kieran's behavior will return to normal. If there's no artificial bond, the separation will have no effect on his judgment or actions. No, Kieran said immediately. I won't be separated from her based on baseless accusations. It's not baseless if we have reason to suspect chemical manipulation, Damien countered. And given the circumstances, we have plenty of reason. Alpha Grayson looked between me and Kieran, his expression unreadable. 1 week. Kieran will remain here, resuming his full duties without contact with Collins. Collins will be confined to the healing quarters, supervised at all times, with no opportunity to administer any substances. At the end of the week, we'll reassemble and assess whether there have been any changes in Kieran's behavior or attachment. Father, Kieran started. This is not negotiable. The Alpha's voice was hard. If you're truly making your own choices, then a week apart should be irrelevant. But if there's any truth to Damien's accusations, we need to know. The integrity of our pack leadership depends on it. I wanted to argue. Wanted to demand evidence, to insist on my innocence, to refuse this humiliating test. But I saw the calculation in the council members' eyes. They were already uncertain. Already wondering if a human could have done something so devious. I agree to the separation, I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. Because I have nothing to hide. I never used Bloodroot or any other substance to manipulate Kieran. Whatever he feels, whatever attachment exists between us, it's real. And a week of separation will prove it. Kieran turned to me, his expression anguished. Collins, it's fine, I said, meeting his eyes. A week is nothing. We'll prove Damien wrong. And then he'll have to answer for making false accusations. But even as I said it, I felt the dread settling into my bones. Because a week apart would prove something. One way or another. And if what Kieran felt for me disappeared once I wasn't there to reinforce it with my presence, with my care, with my desperate need to keep him alive, then maybe Damien was right after all. Maybe what we had wasn't real. Maybe it was just trauma, and proximity, and the dangerous intimacy of healing. The separation begins now, Alpha Grayson said. Vera, escort Collins to the healing quarters, and post a guard. Kieran, you're with me. We have duties to attend to. Vera's hand on my arm was surprisingly gentle as she guided me from the council chamber. Kieran watched us go, his golden eyes burning with fury and helplessness and something else, something that looked terrifyingly like goodbye. The first 3 days were manageable. I threw myself into work in the healing quarters, treating patients, organizing supplies, teaching younger healers the techniques grandmother had taught me. Rowan supervised constantly, as ordered, but her presence wasn't intrusive. She understood what I was going through: the enforced separation, the public suspicion, the humiliation of being accused. They did this to me too, she said on the second day, while we were treating a child with a broken arm. When I first came here, accused me of using human witchcraft to manipulate pack members, separated me from everyone for 2 weeks to prove I wasn't dangerous. How did you survive it? Spite, mostly. Her smile was grim, and the knowledge that proving them wrong would be more satisfying than any revenge I could devise. By the 4th day, the manageable became difficult. I found myself listening for Kieran's footsteps, looking for him in the corridors, reaching for him in my sleep before remembering he wasn't there. The cabin where we'd spent weeks together felt empty, haunted by his absence. Was this withdrawal? Or was this just missing someone I'd spent intense, intimate time with? How could I tell the difference? On the 5th day, Lyra visited me in the healing quarters. She looked troubled, her usual composure fractured. How is he? I asked immediately. Functional. Performing his duties. Training the younger pack members. She paused. And miserable. Snapping at everyone, barely eating, not sleeping. His wolf is restless, aggressive. Yesterday he nearly shifted during a council meeting when someone suggested you might have manipulated him. Relief and guilt flooded through me in equal measure. Relief that his feelings hadn't disappeared. Guilt that my absence was affecting him so badly. That's good, isn't it? I said. Proves there's no artificial bond. Maybe. Or maybe it proves the bond is so strong that withdrawal symptoms are severe. Lyra sat down beside me. Collins, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be completely honest. Did you, at any point, use any substance that could have influenced his emotions or perceptions? No. Never. I swear on grandmother's memory. On everything I hold sacred, I never manipulated him. She studied my face for a long moment. I believe you. But that creates a different problem. What problem? If there's no artificial bond, if what exists between you is real. She trailed off, but I understood what she wasn't saying. If our connection was real, it was also potentially more dangerous than any drug-induced attachment. Because real feelings couldn't be dismissed or waited out. They were permanent complications in a world that didn't have space for human shifter bonds. What happens at the end of the week? I asked quietly. The council reconvenes. They assess Kieran's behavior, and they decide whether you're free to stay or whether you're too much of a risk. Lyra's expression was sympathetic. But Collins, you need to understand something. Even if they decide there's no manipulation, even if they acknowledge the bond is real, that doesn't mean they'll allow it to continue. A human healer and the Alpha's heir, romantically involved. That's politically complicated in ways that could tear the pack apart. I never said we were romantically involved. You didn't have to. Everyone can see it. The way he looks at you. The way you respond to him. The fact that you both nearly killed yourselves to save each other. She stood, touched my shoulder gently. 2 more days. And then we'll see if the truth is your salvation or your doom. On the 6th day, I was allowed to walk the perimeter of pack territory under guard, a concession to the fact that I'd been confined indoors for nearly a week. The guard assigned to me was young, quiet, and kept a respectful distance. I was standing at the edge of the forest, breathing in the pine-scented air, when I heard footsteps behind me. Not the guard, someone else. Someone whose approach made my heart recognize him before I turned around. Kieran stood 10 feet away, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His golden eyes were wild, desperate, and fixed on me with an intensity that stole my breath. You're not supposed to be here, I said. I know. His voice was rough. But I can't do this anymore. Can't pretend that a week apart proves anything except that I'm lost without you. Kieran, I don't care if it's real or artificial or some combination of both. I don't care if the council forbids it or if my father disowns me. I don't care about any of it. He closed the distance between us, his hands framing my face. I love you. And I think I've loved you since you knelt in the blood-soaked forest and refused to let me die. Since you asked me riddles to keep me conscious. Since you promised you wouldn't let death win. My breath caught. You can't say that. Not now. Not when we're being watched. Especially now. Especially when they're trying to prove what we have is false. His thumbs brushed across my cheeks, and I realized I was crying. Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me I'm alone in this, and I'll walk away. I'll accept the council's judgment. I'll let you go back to your grandmother. I'll pretend none of this meant anything. I should have lied. Should have protected us both by denying everything. But I'd been raised to value truth, and I couldn't betray that now. Not even to save us. I love you too, I whispered. And I have no idea if it's because we went through trauma together, or because you're genuinely everything I never knew I wanted, or because fate decided to bind us together in the cruelest possible way. But it's real. Whatever we have, it's real. He kissed me then. And it was nothing like the gentle, tentative first kiss of fairy tales. It was desperate and fierce and tasted like salt from my tears, and blood from where he'd bitten his lip raw with frustration. It was a promise and a claiming and a defiance all at once. When we broke apart, both breathless, I saw the young guard watching us with wide eyes. You're going to report this, I said to him. He hesitated. Then, I should. It's my duty. But? Kieran asked. But, I was at the autumn gathering. I saw you fight. Saw you win using everything you had, including the healing she gave you. And I don't think artificial bonds make someone fight like that. I think real ones do. He turned away deliberately. I'm going to patrol the perimeter. I'll be back in 10 minutes. What you do before then is between you and the gods. He disappeared into the trees, giving us privacy we didn't deserve and couldn't afford. This changes everything, I said quietly. The guard will talk eventually, even if not officially. People will know. Let them know. Kieran's arms wrapped around me, pulling me against his chest. I'm done hiding. Done pretending that duty is more important than love. Done sacrificing happiness for political convenience. Your father will never accept it. Then I'll challenge his authority. Step down as heir if necessary. But I won't give you up. Not for pack politics. Not for tradition. Not for anything. He pulled back enough to look at me. Unless you want to leave. If you want to go back to your grandmother, to your old life, I'll let you go. I'll even convince the council to release you from the debt. But if you stay knowing that I will fight for this. For us. No matter what it costs. I thought about the promises I'd made. To save him, to heal him, to get him through the challenge alive. I'd kept all of those. Had sacrificed sleep and safety and my own peace of mind to fulfill them. But somewhere along the way, I'd made another promise. An unspoken one, written in the language of shared silences and desperate care and moments of vulnerability in the dark. A promise that said, I see you. Not the heir, not the warrior, not the future alpha. I see the man who's terrified of failing his people. And I love him anyway. I stay, I said. Whatever comes, I stay. He kissed me again, softer this time. A seal on the promise we'd both just made. When the guard returned, we were standing apart, but not hiding, not pretending nothing had happened. The truth was written on our faces, in the way our hands reached for each other before we remembered we shouldn't, in the way we looked at each other like the rest of the world had ceased to exist. The council meets tomorrow, the guard said quietly. You should prepare, tomorrow. One more night of separation, one more night of uncertainty, and then we'd face judgment together. The council chamber was packed when we arrived, not just the 7 council members but dozens of pack members who'd crowded in to witness the verdict. This wasn't just about me and Kieran anymore. This was about whether humans could be trusted, whether tradition could evolve, whether love could exist across the divide that separated our species. Damien stood at the front, smug and confident. He'd won already, in his mind. Either I was guilty of manipulation, or I was guilty of seducing the heir. Either way, he'd created chaos in his rival's pack. We've completed the week of separation, Alpha Grayson said, his voice carrying across the packed chamber. Observations have been made. Behaviors documented. The council has deliberated. We're ready to render judgment. My hand found Kieran's, and I didn't let go. Whatever happened next, we'd face it together. The evidence suggests, Alpha Grayson continued, that there was no artificial manipulation, No bloodroot, no chemical influence. Kieran's behavior during separation was consistent with genuine attachment, not withdrawal from addictive substances. Relief started to flood through me. But the alpha wasn't finished. However, the existence of a genuine romantic bond between my heir and a human healer presents complications. It violates tradition, creates political vulnerabilities, and raises questions about divided loyalties and future leadership. Here it came, but that would destroy us. Therefore, the council has reached a decision. Wait. Kieran stepped forward, still holding my hand. Before you render judgment, I need to say something. Alpha Grayson's expression was unreadable. Speak. I love her. Completely, irrevocably, without reservation or shame. And I won't apologize for it. Won't hide it. Won't let politics or tradition destroy it. His voice was clear, carrying to every corner of the chamber. If loving her means I can't be heir, I accept that. If it means I'm exiled from the pack, I accept that too. But I won't give her up. Not for this pack. Not for my position. Not even for you, Father. Silence. Absolute, shocked silence. Then Alpha Grayson did something I never expected. He laughed. You think this is the first time a shifter has fallen for a human? Alpha Grayson's laughter faded into something softer, almost nostalgic. You think tradition is iron, unchanging, carved in stone by ancestors who knew better than us? He looked at Lyra, and something passed between them, a shared memory. A secret long kept. Tell them. Lyra said quietly. Alpha Grayson turned back to the assembled pack, his ice blue eyes sweeping across familiar faces. My mate Kieran's mother was human. She died bringing him into this world. But she lived long enough to make me promise something, that our son would never have to choose between duty and love the way I did. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. I felt Kieran's hand tighten around mine, felt his entire body go rigid with the revelation. You never told me, Kieran said, his voice barely audible, because the pack wasn't ready to hear it. Because admitting I'd mated with a human would have undermined my authority in ways we couldn't afford. Because Grayson's expression cracked, showing grief beneath the leadership mask. Because it was easier to let everyone believe she was one of us. Easier to protect her memory by erasing part of who she was. But now? Lyra prompted. Now my son stands here, refusing to hide, refusing to be ashamed, demanding the right to love openly. And I realize that keeping his mother's truth hidden doesn't honor her memory. It dishonors her sacrifice. He stepped down from his position, moved to stand directly in front of me and Kieran. Collins of Millbrook. You saved my son's life. You proved your skill, your courage, your integrity. You've earned the respect of our healers and the grudging adrubation of our warriors. And you've done something I never thought possible. You've made my son believe that love is stronger than fear. He placed one hand on Kieran's shoulder, one on mine. The council's decision is this. Collins will remain in Silverpine as head healer in training under Rowan's supervision. The life debt is considered satisfied, but a new bond is acknowledged, one of choice, not obligation. Kieran will continue as heir, with the understanding that his human mate will be afforded the same respect and protection as any pack member. Mate? I whispered. We haven't. The bond exists whether you've formalized it or not, Grayson said. Anyone with eyes can see it. Anyone with sense can recognize it. And anyone who challenges it, his gaze found Damien in the crowd, will answer to me personally. Damien's expression was twisted with rage and disbelief. This is insanity. You're allowing a human to corrupt your bloodline, to weaken your pack's genetic strength. Careful. Lyra's voice cut through his protest like a blade. You're speaking about the Alpha's late mate. About Kieran's mother. About a woman who gave her life to bring the next Alpha into this world. Choose your next words very carefully. Damien's mouth snapped shut. He looked around the chamber, seeking support, but found none. The pack members were watching Grayson with new understanding, seeing their leader's decades of grief and hidden love, recognizing the strength it took to protect that secret while bearing the weight of leadership alone. This council is concluded, Grayson said. The judgment stands. Kieran and Collins are free to pursue their bond without interference. Anyone who has objections can take them up with me in private. Anyone who acts on those objections without permission will be dealt with as traitors. Is that clear? A rumble of acknowledgement went through the assembled pack. Not everyone was happy. I could see disapproval on several faces, but no one was willing to challenge the Alpha directly. Damien pushed through the crowd toward the exit, his two companions following. As he passed us, he leaned close enough that only Kieran and I could hear. "This isn't over," he whispered. "You've made enemies today, powerful ones. And eventually, your father won't be able to protect you." Then he was gone, and we were left standing in the center of the council chamber, still holding hands, trying to process everything that had just happened. "You're free," Grayson said quietly. "Just to us. Both of you. Free to build whatever future you choose. But understand, freedom comes with responsibility. Collins, you'll be scrutinized more than any pack member. Every decision you make, every treatment you provide, will be questioned. You'll have to be better than good. You'll have to be flawless." "I understand," I said. "And Kieran," Grayson's expression turned serious. "You've declared your feelings publicly. There's no taking that back, no hiding if things become difficult. You'll face resistance, judgment, possibly violence from those who believe humans weaken our kind. You'll have to defend your choice, and her, every single day." "I know," Kieran said. "I'm ready." Grayson studied us both for a long moment. Then he did something completely unexpected. He pulled Kieran into an embrace, fierce and tight, and filled with decades of unspoken grief. "Your mother would be proud of you," he said roughly. "Proud that you're brave enough to love openly, to fight for happiness, instead of just duty. That's her legacy, not the secrecy, but the love that was worth keeping secret." When he released Kieran, there were tears in both their eyes. The crowd began to disperse, pack members filing out in small groups, their conversations a mixture of shock, approval, and skepticism. Lyra approached us, her expression softer than I'd ever seen it. "Come," she said, "let me tell you about your mother, Kieran. About the woman who was strong enough to love an Alpha, brave enough to join a world that terrified her, and wise enough to make him promise that their son would never have to hide the way they did." We spent the evening in Lyra's quarters, me, Kieran, Lyra, and Rowan, who'd been invited because she'd known Kieran's mother during her final months. They told stories of a human woman who'd wandered into pack territory 26 years ago, who'd been fierce and clever and unafraid of the wolves who could have killed her. "She saw your father in wolf form," Lyra said, "and instead of running, she asked if he needed medical attention. There was blood on his fur from a territorial dispute. She thought he was injured." "Was he?" Kieran asked. "No, the blood wasn't his, but he was so shocked by her lack of fear that he shifted to human form just to ask what was wrong with her survival instincts." Lyra's smile was bittersweet. She told him that fear was a choice, and she chose curiosity instead. He fell in love with her in that moment, though he didn't admit it for months. "She was a healer too," Rowan added. "Not trained like Collins, but she had the gift. Could see sickness in people before it manifested, could sense when something was wrong. She taught me some of what I know, actually. Techniques passed down through her family line. I thought about grandmother, about the old knowledge she carried. What was her name?" "Sarah," Lyra said softly. "Sarah of Millbrook." The room went completely silent. That was my grandmother's teacher," I said slowly. "The one who trained her in the old healing ways. The one who—" My breath caught. "The one who disappeared 26 years ago. Everyone in Millbrook assumed she'd died, but grandmother never believed it. She always said Sarah had found something worth living for that was more important than coming home. She found love," Kieran said, his voice thick with emotion. "She found my father. And she had me. And then she died. Not before making your father promise that you'd be free to love whoever you chose," Lyra said firmly. "Not before extracting an oath that if you ever fell for a human, he'd support it instead of hiding it the way he'd hidden her." Understanding crashed over me in waves. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't random chance. Somehow, impossibly, I was connected to Kieran through bloodlines that went back decades. Through a woman who'd loved a wolf, who'd died bringing their son into the world, who'd been important enough to my grandmother that her disappearance was still spoken of with reverence. "The red bottle," I said suddenly. The one grandmother gave me. The one I used to save Kieran in the forest. That was Sarah's formula, wasn't it? The one she developed specifically for treating shifter wounds. Rowan nodded. She created it because regular medicine didn't work fast enough on your father when he was injured. Needed something that could compete with shifter healing, could close wounds before the body rejected treatment. She only made enough for 2 bottles before she died. Ruby, your grandmother, kept them both. One for emergencies, one as a memorial. And I used half of the emergency bottle on a dying wolf I didn't know. I said. On Sarah's son. Like some part of me recognized him. Recognized that he was worth using irreplaceable medicine on. Or like Sarah's legacy called to itself. Lyra said softly. Like the promise she extracted from Grayson reached across time, and pulled you to exactly the right place, at exactly the right moment, to save her son. Kieran was quiet, processing all of this. Then he looked at me, and his expression held wonder and grief, and something that looked like destiny accepting itself. My mother brought us together, he said. Across death, across time, across species. She made sure I'd find someone like you. Someone who'd love me enough to refuse to let me die. Someone connected to her through knowledge and skill and bloodline. Or, I said gently, we fell in love, because we fell in love. Because you were dying and I couldn't walk away. Because you fought for your life and I fought to save it. Because against all odds and logic, we found each other worth the risk. Can it be both? He pulled me close, and I rested my head against his chest, listened to his heartbeat strong, steady, alive, because I'd refused any other outcome. Destiny and choice, legacy and love, all of it tangled together, until you can't separate what was meant to be from what we made happen. I suppose it can, I agreed. We stayed in Lyra's quarters until late into the night, learning about Sarah, about the secret love that had shaped pack politics for decades, about the promises made over a dying woman's body that had bound a pack to accepting what they'd once have destroyed. And slowly, I began to understand that this was what love looked like in the world of wolves. Complicated, dangerous, requiring constant defending, but also worth fighting for, worth keeping promises for, worth surviving for. A month later, I stood in the healing quarters, now officially recognized as Rowan's apprentice and eventual successor. My days were full of work, of teaching and learning, of treating injuries and illnesses that came with living in a world of constant physical challenge. But my nights were with Kieran, in quarters we now shared openly. No more hiding. No more pretending the bond between us was purely professional. We were building a life together, one careful day at a time, knowing that every moment was both gift and battle. Question, Kieran said one evening, as we lay tangled together in the darkness, his fingers tracing the scars on my hands from years of healing work. Answer, I replied, the old pattern from our time in the recovery cabin. Do you regret it? Saving me that night? Everything that came after? I thought about it seriously. About the fear, the pain, the endless challenges and judgments, about giving up the quiet life I'd known for one filled with scrutiny and danger. No, I said finally. Because you were worth saving. Because this, I gestured at the space between us, at the life we were building. This is worth fighting for. Because sometimes the hardest promises are the ones that change everything. The riddle, he said softly. A promise. You gave me the answer that first night in the surgical room. I've thought about it every day since. About how promises walk on 4 legs when they're new and shaky, on 2 legs when they're strong, on 3 legs when they need support. And sometimes on no legs at all, just faith and intention. And which are we now? I asked. He pulled me closer. We're the kind that walks on all of them at once. Still shaky sometimes, still learning to stand strong, still needing support, but also the kind that exists beyond words in the space between heartbeats, in the moments of shared silence, in the certainty that whatever comes next, we face it together. Outside, wolves howled at the moon, the pack's nightly ritual, reaffirming bonds and territory. And for the first time since I'd arrived, I felt like I belonged to that sound, like I was part of something ancient and ongoing, like I'd found home in the most unexpected place, in the arms of a wolf I'd refused to let die, who'd refused to let me go. The promise I'd made in a blood-soaked forest had transformed into something neither of us could have predicted, had become love, partnership, future, had become the kind of story that would be told around fires for generations. About the human healer and the wolf heir. About sacrifice and survival. About promises kept against impossible odds. And as I drifted toward sleep, safe and whole, and loved beyond measure, I thought about grandmother's words. Healing is the most selfish act. We do it because we can't stand the idea of a world with less life in it. She'd been right, but she'd also been incomplete. Healing was selfish, but it was also the most generous thing we could offer. The refusal to let death win. The stubborn insistence that life, in all its complicated, dangerous, beautiful forms, was worth fighting for. I'd healed Kieran's body in that forest. But somehow, in the process, he'd healed something in me I hadn't known was broken. The belief that I had to face the world alone. That love was a luxury I couldn't afford. That my gift for saving lives meant I'd never have one worth living. He'd proven all of that wrong. And in doing so, had given me the greatest gift of all. A future full of promises still waiting to be made. Epilogue. 6 months later. The healing quarters were quiet in the pre-dawn darkness. That sacred hour when the night shift ended and the day shift hadn't yet begun. I was organizing supplies, a meditative task I'd come to love when Rowan appeared in the doorway, her expression troubled. "We have a situation," she said. 3 travelers at the border. 2 shifters and a human. All 3 injured. All 3 refusing to say which one of them needs help most. I grabbed my emergency kit. What kind of injuries? From what the border patrol described, severe. Life-threatening for at least one of them. Possibly all 3. She was already moving toward the door. But here's the strange part. They're traveling together. A wolf shifter, a bear shifter, and a human woman. And according to the guards, they all claim to be the same person. That's impossible. I know. Which is why I need you to come with me. Because either they're delusional from blood loss, or something very strange is happening at our border. We rode out to the eastern checkpoint, as dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Kieran had insisted on coming when he heard about the mysterious travelers. His protective instincts wouldn't let me ride into potential danger alone, even with Rowan and a full guard escort. The border station was small, just a cabin in a cleared area where travelers could be assessed before being allowed into packed territory. 2 guards stood watch, and between them, I stopped breathing. 3 people sat on the ground, each wounded, each bleeding, each watching the others with expressions of confusion and terror. But that wasn't what made my healer's mind stall. They had the same face. Not similar, not closely resembling. Identical. The same sharp cheekbones, the same storm gray eyes, the same scar bisecting the left eyebrow. The only differences were their forms, one fully human, one with wolf characteristics showing through human features, one massive, even while sitting clearly a bear shifter. "What in the name of the goddess?" Kieran breathed beside me. The human woman spoke first, her voice hoarse with pain and exhaustion. "Please. We don't understand what's happening. We were one person. I was one person. And then I woke up like this, split into 3. And all of us are dying, but we don't know which one is the original. Which one has the real wound? Which one needs saving?" I dismounted, approached carefully. Medical training overrode shock. "Show me the injuries." "All of them." The human woman lifted her shirt, revealing a deep gash across her ribs, the kind of wound that suggested a blade, wielded with intent to kill. The wolf shifter, a young male, maybe 25, pulled back his torn clothing to show an identical wound. Same location, same depth, same everything. The bear shifter, older and larger, had the same injury. 3 bodies, 1 wound, replicated perfectly across all of them. "How is this possible?" Rowan murmured, kneeling beside me as I examined each version. "Some kind of shifter magic gone wrong? A curse? Or a gift?" Lyra said, appearing from the cabin where she'd been conferring with the border guards. "There are stories, old ones, from before the Pax established territories, about individuals born with multiple forms, multiple selves. They were called the Triformed. Legend said they could exist in 3 states simultaneously: human, primary shifter form, and secondary form. But the magic was unstable, dangerous, Most of them died young, torn apart by the conflict between their three natures. I didn't choose this. The human woman girl, really. She couldn't be more than 20, said desperately. I was just me. Just Raven. Just trying to survive in the borderlands between territories. And then I was attacked. And I was dying. And I felt myself splitting. Like my body couldn't decide which form to die in, so it chose all of them. That suggests the wound was inflicted while you were shifting, I said, my mind working through the medical implications. Your body was caught between forms when the blade struck. The trauma locked you in a state of partial transformation, but instead of being stuck between two forms, you fragmented into three separate entities. Can you fix it? The wolf version asked. Can you put us back together? I looked at Rowan, at Lyra, at Kieran. None of them had answers. I don't know, I admitted. This is beyond anything I've ever encountered. Beyond anything in the medical texts or my grandmother's teachings. I stood, made a decision. But I can keep all three of you alive while we figure it out. Rowan, we need to transport them to the healing quarters. Kieran, send word to your father. If this girl is triformed, if the old legends are real, then we're dealing with something that will interest every pack in the territory. Why? The bear shifter asked, his deep voice rumbling. Why would the packs care about one broken person? Lyra's expression was grim. Because if you're truly triformed, if you can exist in three states simultaneously, then you're potentially the most powerful shifter born in centuries. The question is whether you're a weapon, a curse, or a rubicule, and every pack will want to claim you or destroy you before anyone else can. The three versions of Raven looked at each other, and I saw the same thought reflected in all 6 gray eyes. I was just trying to survive. And now I'm in more danger than ever. We'll protect you, Kieran said firmly. All 3 of you. While Collins works to heal you, you'll be under Silverpine's protection. No one touches you without going through me first. Why would you help me us whatever? Human Raven asked. You don't know us. Don't owe us anything. Because someone once helped me when they didn't have to, Kieran said, his eyes finding mine. Someone saw a dying wolf and chose to save him, even though it was dangerous and complicated, and turned her entire life upside down. That act of mercy changed everything. So now it's my turn to pay that forward. As we loaded the 3 versions of Raven onto stretchers, as we began the careful journey back to the main compound, I felt the weight of a new promise settling over me. Another impossible case. Another life, or lives, hanging in the balance. But this time, I wasn't facing it alone. I had Kieran beside me, Rowan's expertise to draw on, Lyra's knowledge of old magic. I had a pack that had learned to accept the impossible, that had made space for a human healer in their world of wolves. This is going to be complicated, Rowan said quietly as we rode. Everything worth doing is, I replied. 3 versions of one person. Multiple consciousnesses, multiple bodies, one shared wound. It violates every principle of healing I know. Then we'll learn new principles. I looked back at the stretchers, at the 3 identical faces watching the sky with the same expression of wonder and fear. Because that's what healers do. We learn. We adapt. We find ways to save lives that shouldn't be savable. Spoken like Ruby's granddaughter, Rowan said with something that might have been pride. And like Sarah's spiritual successor, both of them would be proud of the healer you've become. As the sun climbed higher, as we entered pack territory with our mysterious cargo, I thought about the riddle that had connected me to Kieran in the forest. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, 3 legs in the evening, and sometimes on no legs at all? A promise. I'd made a promise to save Kieran. And it had changed my life completely. Had brought me here, to this pack, to this future I never could have imagined. And now I was making another promise. To save 3 versions of one person. To solve a medical puzzle that shouldn't have a solution. To prove that healing wasn't limited by convention or tradition, or the boundaries of what seemed possible. Raven, all 3 of her would live. I would make sure of it. Even if I had to tear apart every medical text, question every assumption, learn entirely new ways of understanding how bodies and magic intertwined. Because that's what promises meant. Commitment beyond reason. Faith beyond evidence. The stubborn refusal to let death win even when victory seemed impossible. The healing quarters awaited. The real work was about to begin. And somewhere in those three identical faces, in that impossible fragmentation of one soul into three forms, was a story waiting to unfold. A story about identity and transformation, about which version of yourself was real when all of them existed simultaneously, about love that would have to navigate three bodies and one heart. But that was a story for another time. For now, I had wounds to treat, mysteries to unravel, and promises to keep. The sun rose fully over Silverpine territory, illuminating the path ahead, and I walked it with confidence, knowing that whatever challenges came next, I was ready. After all, I'd saved a dying wolf with nothing but herbs and will. How much harder could three versions of one person be? I had a feeling I was about